So, how are you, Sam Faddis?
I am doing great. Thanks for having me.
So I want to give a little background on you, and I kind of want to just get into it. So Correct me where I'm wrong.
Okay.
You were in the CIA from 1988 to 2008.
Check.
10 years private after.
Check. Yeah.
You worked in counterterrorism.
Yes.
Biological warfare.
Yeah. All kinds of weapons of mass destruction.
You are a lawyer.
I am. That's the real skeleton in my closet.
That's the worst one.
That's the thing I try to hide from.
Now,
don't let people know that.
You're also an author.
Yep.
And you've written 6 books.
Yes.
Varying from topics.
Some of them are fiction that I wrote mostly because it was fun, and 3 of them are nonfiction. They're all intel, counterterrorism, stuff like that.
And you now ANDmagazine, is that yours too?
Yes, my wife and I.
Okay, and your wife's name was
Gina,
and she was also in.
She was also a CIA operations officer. She did everything I did. She looked better doing it. She's my entire career is Operation Coattails. I just follow her around, try to take credit for what she does.
Oh, he's a good husband too.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like my relationship.
So can you explain to me what you did without going into detail in your time in the CIA and after briefly?
Yeah. I was also an Army officer along the way too.
Okay. I didn't read that.
Was that before CIA?
Yes.
Okay.
So I was an operations officer, what the CIA calls an operations officer or a case officer or whatever. That's their internal speak, right? What normal average people would call a spy. CIA doesn't really use the term that way because a spy to them is the foreigner you recruit that passes you secrets. If I recruit a guy inside the Kremlin to give me nuclear launch codes,
right?
To use the old Mission Impossible example, he's the spy, I'm the intelligence officer.
Gotcha.
That's CIA speak. Okay, so what's your job? You recruit, number one job, recruit spies, recruit sources inside Russian intelligence, inside Al-Qaeda, inside whatever. And then obviously meet those sources, what they would call handle those sources, produce the intelligence from those sources. I get a guy inside Al-Qaeda. Now I got to keep him alive, and now he's going to pass me intelligence, and we're going to pass that to Washington. Beyond that, that's the bread and butter of what CIA does. CIA also does what you call covert action, right? Clandestine operations. So I spent a year before the invasion of Iraq. I was in charge of the base inside Iraq.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So from 2002 to 2003, I was up in the mountains in Kurdistan inside Iraq, and we were doing all the prep for the invasion. Some of that was gathering intelligence, but some of that is blowing stuff up. Some of that is recruiting locals to blow stuff up. CIA also does that. I did all of that stuff.
So that'd be like a covert operations thing, or would that be just operations?
Well, it's all operations. I mean, the CIA would call that covert action. So as opposed to human source handling or human source recruiting, now we're getting lost in a lot of terminology. Doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything to anybody, and they don't need to care. But when we were inside Iraq, we were conducting covert action. The ultimate goal was to overthrow Saddam, which we did successfully, right? So we were laying the groundwork for that for about a year.
I feel like I'm trying to take a sip of water from a fire hose right now. This is great.
What's that, UHF with Weird Al? You get to drink from
Time
the
to drink from the fire hose. This is great. So when did you meet your wife?
I met my wife in high school.
No.
Really?
For real.
So throughout your military CIA career, were you out of the country a lot of the time, or were you located in the U.S.?
So when I was in the Army, I was stateside.
Okay.
My dad was a military officer, so I lived overseas for a little bit growing up as well. But when I was with the Army, I was mostly out in Washington State, although I went to a bunch of other places for training like you typically do. Then I joined the agency. I was undercover for 20 years. Almost all of that time we were out of the country. If we came home, we were basically what you call turning and burning. We were coming home, maybe going through additional training, and then real quick, we're back out and we're on to our next assignment.
Okay. So, just the way that you spoke about your wife now, obviously you guys have a good relationship, just the way that you speak about her. How was that? I mean, we're all married.
How is it to maintain a marriage?
Yeah. How did you, I mean, that just seems like it would be incredibly tough. I mean, were you guys apart a lot, or how did that work?
Well, first of all, you got to be really nice to her because she can kill you in a heartbeat. So there's
good to know. Mental note. Good stuff. Right.
Statistically, your spouse is the number one suspect.
That's
in your case more so.
We were assigned together most of the time, not all the time. When I was inside Iraq for a year, she wasn't there. There are other times in our career where actually I would have been the one at home with the kids, and she was the one off someplace where I didn't go, but we were both still operational wherever we were. For us, it worked. You know, I think this depends on the nature of your relationship. For us, we've been together forever. For us, the fact that we were working together and operating together probably was the only way it would have worked. I mean, if I'm a CIA operations officer and my wife is not a CIA operations officer, it's not true that she doesn't know what I do. That's maybe that was true once upon a time. At this point in history, that's not the way it works. I mean, unless you're a very strange guy, you've told your wife what you do, and she knows. She knows in generality what you do.
It doesn't seem like a good foundation for a relationship.
But it doesn't change the fact that you're still disappearing out into the dark in the middle of the night for hours at a time, because that's your gig, that's your job, right? And when you come back, you really can't tell her anything about where you were and what you were doing. And, you know, over time, this is going to eat up a relationship in a lot of cases. Some people are cool with it. People have different kinds of marriage. For us, that would not have worked. For us, the fact that we knew what we were doing, each other was doing was critical. And also we worked together as a team on the street often. I mean, so it wasn't just sometimes she's out or I'm out. It's sometimes in the middle of an operation, we were both on the street together in the same op.
Is that a benefit to being what you do, and also is it a hindrance because, you know, if a loved one is compromised, a lot of the times that's what people use as leverage against another person. I mean, was there ever I'm sure there's concerns about that, but like, I'm sure everything stayed pretty copacetic, but you know, would that be a thought every now and again?
You know, I think this boils down to how you process it and whether you're cut out for the job or whether you're not cut out for the job. I mean, so we have 4 kids on top of all this, right?
Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
So we're overseas and we're in an assignment, and the kids are in country with us, and we're living in that country full time. So we're literally having dinner with the kids and maybe tucking them into bed and then rolling out on the street, you know, and an hour later we're someplace, you know, carrying guns and meeting a terrorist source and doing whatever we're doing. And then you come back and roll into bed and get up in the morning and make breakfast for the kids. So if you can't compartment that and figure out how to balance that, well, you're in the wrong business. I mean, you know, it's not like a hooray for us thing. It's just you're either psychologically cut out for it or you're not cut out for it.
Well, my wife and I, we own a salon together, so it's kind of the same thing.
Well, you got a lot of dangerous weapons in the salon.
Yes, we do. You've written books. Have you ever written like a biography?
No, see, this
sounds like the world's greatest rom-com.
See, here's the thing. This gets suggested to me all the time.
Yeah.
I've been married for 42 years, right? And basically what people want us to do is write a book about the history of our marriage. I don't know how long you guys have been married, but I can't think of anything more likely to lead to divorce
than
to ask a husband and wife to now agree on the narrative of who was right about every discussion and every argument and in every instance. I've been around long enough to think that's a really bad idea.
There's a lot of wisdom right there.
There's no follow-up thought in a question like that. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you should do that. Yeah, I don't know if that's a good idea. Oh yeah, you're right. It's probably not a good idea. I don't know why I suggested it.
Yeah.
So when you were in there during Bush Sr., Clinton, Bush Jr., and you got out at Obama?
Yes.
And was that it was just time to get out, or was that an administration thing? in 2008?
Well, it was definitely not time to get out. I mean, when I got out, I made the decision for a variety of personal reasons, which I'm happy to discuss, why to leave. And actually, when I dropped my papers to retire, I got called in and asked to pick up my papers and guaranteed promotion and please don't leave. And I had just decided for really what amount to political reasons that I was going out the door. And I wasn't going to change my mind on that.
Okay, so I've often wondered that people that serve military or one of the many agencies we have, can you support the agenda of somebody whose worldview you would disagree very strongly with? If you are in the military, but you're in there because you want to serve your country, you're a peaceful person, and we go to war, you have a moral conundrum there. Or if you think that, this is how we should operate as American citizens in the rest of the world for the good of the world and the good of America. And then, like you said, I'm going to make an assumption. Obama comes into office, you see his particular worldview and you're like, I don't want to be a part of this. Would that be is that a fair question?
Well, I mean, a part of it, I suppose, in retrospect is Obama. It was look, you hear people say these days, talk a lot about being woke or being red-pilled and so forth. And I think most of us who have gone through that process, and I personally consider myself to be one, can identify with the fact that it doesn't actually happen in one big epiphany. It's not like a single moment and all of a sudden,
Right.
boom, I see everything. It comes, every time you finish thinking you woke up, something happens 2 months later and you're like,
This is nuts.
good God. It's so, not to sound all X-Files, but I hadn't grasped the half of it before, right?
I want to believe, Sam.
Exactly. It's so much worse than I thought. So I'm not going to pretend in retrospect that all of a sudden in 2008, I had this big epiphany and saw everything clearly. I saw a number of things that really bothered me. The most immediate thing I saw was if I continued on in the Central Intelligence Agency and accepted promotion, I saw what that meant in terms of what they were going to expect from me, which in my estimation was largely stop telling the truth, stop in other words, stop doing my job for which they had hired me and buy into this idea of shading the narrative, shaping the narrative. It just, I looked at that and I thought, there are way too many personal compromises in terms of integrity and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not willing to do it. Now, I'm honest enough to say when they asked me to pick up my papers and said, look, guarantee you promotion, you're going right back out, you're going to be chief of station again. There's this moment in time where I'm thinking, cool, I get to go back out, run ops. I love that. I get to be the boss, live in the big house. And then a fraction of a second later, that little voice in my head is saying, Sam, what the heck are you doing right now? You put your papers in for a reason after thinking about this for a very long time. Now, what you got to do, succumb to this temptation, get bought off by these guys? Forget it. The answer is no. I'm walking.
It would have taken too much of a personal compromise, basically.
100%. It would be like, okay, look, what you're asking me to do is, yes, you're asking me to compromise things that I'm not going to compromise on.
When you say shape the narrative, what narrative are you referring to?
Whatever narrative Washington wants pushed. And
okay.
So, look, I always looked at it this way, and it's not that I looked at it this way. This is the job as you're a CIA case officer. Number one job, before we get to all the sexy stuff about overthrowing governments and all that stuff, is provide information to Washington, D.C. so they can make policy decisions in the best interest of the people of the United States.
Right.
First line of defense for the people of the United States, warn them of threats. Call it like you see it. Facts, no shading, no spin. You don't like what I'm telling you? Not my problem. I'm telling you what my sources are telling you and giving you my best assessment of are they lying, are they not lying, do they really know, whatever. Now, over to you in Washington, policymakers to decide what to do with the information. But I'm not going to shape what I tell you to make it easier for you.
Like more palatable for you. Yeah.
Precisely. And
because the world's a dark place.
Yes.
And sometimes protecting people isn't protecting people. Like you need to just tell them the truth,
If the whole reason why we have a Central Intelligence Agency is precisely to do what you just said, which is tell the truth, right?
Right.
If I'm in a country in the Middle East and you want to believe they're helping us against Al Qaeda, And my sources tell me definitively that they're lying to the face of the ambassador, that they're not helping us, that in fact they are sheltering Al-Qaeda, that every time you tell them to go raid a safe house, they warn the Al-Qaeda guys before they go raid the safe house. If that's what my sources tell me, I'm going to report that to you. If that's embarrassing to you in the Department of State, that puts the president in a tough position. I don't care. Like, it's not, I can't care, right? I can't make that decision. You can now decide whether you're going to use the information or not. That's your job. But I'm going to tell you what I know. I'm not going to tell you, I get it. You want me to tell you that these guys who are smiling in your face are really our friends. It ain't true, so I'm not going to say it.
It's so funny because listening to you talk like that, even down to some of your mannerisms. My son's a cancer survivor. He diagnosed when he was 3 years old. And I remember having a conversation with the doctor when he sat across the table to my wife, and I was like, your son's probably not going to live another 3 months. And just hearing you say what you're saying, it's like, this is the truth. It sucks, but this is the truth. And my son is now
respect
18 years old, and it's just...
You got to respect it, and it's the only way you can do your job, right? I give you an example to put meat on the bones here. When we were in Iraq, in Kurdistan, in advance of the invasion, at one point we were down very close to the Iranian border, and there's part of an area at that point, the northern part of Iraq where the Kurds are was essentially independent of Saddam's control, and within that Kurdish area there was another enclave that was basically under the control of an offshoot of Al Qaeda, crazy little jihadist kingdom in the mountains along the Iranian-Iraq border. We were very focused on those guys because they were playing with chemical weapons and biological weapons and all kinds of stuff, and we were trying to head that off.
Yeah.
It became very clear that while we were focused on this Al-Qaeda threat, that Washington would really love it if we could produce intelligence that said that Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden were working together. Because this is before the invasion in the White House.
What year was this?
So this would be 2002. So George Bush.
I think it was March 2003 is when they went in.
When they went in. So this I'm talking summer of 2002. We were already in there. And they were
less than a year after 9/11.
Yeah, and we're already looking for, the decision had already been made. We're going to invade Iraq, and they're looking for how to sell this to the American people.
Oh, marketing and branding.
Okay, so if we can say Saddam and UBL are in business together, that will make this easy. It's right after 9/11. That's why we're going into Iraq. So they would obviously like us to produce intelligence from a lot of guys we're capturing out of Al-Qaeda and questioning that shows that this connection exists. So at one point I called the whole team together, which is a grand total of 8 of us at that point. And I just told them up front as the chief, I said, this is the deal. We all know the deal. We know what they want us to say. If we acquire that intelligence and we think it's credible intelligence, I'll be the happiest guy in the world to press the button to send that report to DC to say that Saddam and Osama are in bed. But I don't care how much political pressure there is. That doesn't change anything about how you guys do your job. Run your sources, produce your intelligence. If the intelligence is not there, we are not going to say that or suggest that. Nothing about their political interest. I didn't need to tell these guys that really because they're all pros. What I wanted them to do was hear it from me as the team leader, that, okay, it's out in the open here. We all talked about it. You all know directly from me, nothing changes, do your job. Because that's the only way you can function. In the end, by the way, we found no such evidence of any connection.
Still.
So as you're talking and knowing your background, for me, I'm like, ask him about every conspiracy theory in my head. That's just what's pounding through my head right now.
All right, hit me.
No, don't.
Okay. Hey, listen, he said he would stop me.
We have to stay on topic.
Well, no, I mean, kind of, but on topic with that, some of the back and forth over the past, couple decades has been, were there weapons of mass destruction? Why did we go in? Like, that was what sold it to the American people.
Yes.
And
was it yellow cake uranium? And it was
the answer is yes.
No, the answer is no. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
Okay.
That was Colin Powell. And who was the
but I mean,
what was the ambassador? It was they made a movie about it. I forget the name. It was a woman, and then like Dick Cheney's chief of staff outed her.
Why am I spacing on her name? I know her very well. I served with her.
Man, I forget the name. Anyways,
lives out in New Mexico now.
Yeah, she had her husband. Her husband was like her husband. Wasn't her husband like a?
Yes. He was
Valerie Plame.
Yes, Valerie Plame.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
So I mean, but to me, I take a step back and I'm like, that correct me if I'm wrong, lie that was sold to the American people set off a chain of world events that is unbelievable.
It's still happening
and there
today.
were never any consequences for that?
No.
What are consequences? Who gets the consequences?
I don't know, but I mean,
and for the record, just to be clear, we were the only team inside Iraq
yeah,
in advance of that invasion, and we never told them we found weapons of mass destruction.
You were the only team in Iraq in the lead up.
They were the only team on the ground inside Iraq. We were there for almost a year and never told them that we found weapons of mass destruction. Never.
I mean, that's so mind-boggling because I was, geez, I mean, it changed everything.
I was 23, man.
I was 20, and I mean, we went to war.
Yeah,
it created. Why am I blanking now on the terrorist ISIS? Yeah, I mean, out of the void that was created there, ISIS came about.
Yeah,
and even Afghanistan and the correlation there, and even up until very recently, the pullout of Afghanistan and the travesty that was. I mean, it set off unbelievable repercussion. Like that lie, just the repercussions of that is just unbelievable.
I think if you look at our age range, like we were all in our 20s. So there was a big movement too of like
enlist the next day.
Yeah, men our age were all like, "Let's go. We're going to go sign up. We're going to go enlist," and they were all enlisting under a lie.
Yeah,
right. That's a crazy thing. It's like who was it Emmett Till who was falsely accused? Wasn't that?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said this white woman said that he had touched her in an elevator, and obviously he died. There was a big riot, and it was based off of a lie. Like I think when these things like this happen, I always go back to like that simple story of like the simple. It's not a simple lie, but it's still a lie.
Well, I mean, look, the reality is the decision to invade Iraq was made by February of 2002 at the latest. I can tell you that because
General Clark was looking at that. I remember a video of General Clark saying, here's the strategy for Syria, Afghanistan, Iran.
Well, I mean, I know the decision was made because that's when I was named to be team leader to take the team in. It took
you have more knowledge than I do. So
took us a few.
Hold on, Marky's got this.
Yeah.
Took us a few months to get in, but the reality was we stood up the team in February of 2002, and then we were just working through issues that had to do mostly with getting into Iraq. And there was no reference to weapons of mass destruction at that point. It was Saddam is an enemy. He's a menace to the Middle East. We're going to take him out next, which maybe is a justifiable national security decision. But if that's the basis on which you made it, that's what you should say to the American people, right?
Sure.
Not. Okay. Then as this thing progresses, you got to the point, actually long after we were already in country, where politically, obviously, somebody's making a decision. Okay, how are we going to sell this to the American people? How do we convince them? The sort of generic Saddam is a menace to the Middle East thing doesn't seem like it's going to fly. And now it becomes weapons of mass destruction. That's why we got to go take this guy out.
So are you saying that 9/11 and the invasion of Iraq were essentially in two different thought bubbles? Like on one side, yes, we're going after bin Laden. But the invasion of Iraq, was that disconnected from 9/11, or was it?
I don't think they've ever made a connection.
We've been wanting to do this for a while.
Yeah, I think that's the summation. We've been wanting to do this for a while. And by the way, this guy tried to take out my dad.
Yeah.
So we're going to go.
Was it really that? Just he was finishing up where Dad left off?
It's like this is unfinished business. We're going to get rid of Saddam. And again, if that's your argument, then say that to the American people.
Yeah.
By the way, it would be nice to get a vote of Congress in support of that on that issue, because that's the way this is supposed to work.
Yeah, you're supposed to have Congress is supposed to be.
Call him Middle Eastern Hitler, and everybody will vote for it.
Look, when I was named to be team leader, there was no representation that the reason why we're going to Baghdad is because of weapons of mass destruction. That wasn't. I mean, are we going to go there and collect on weapons of mass destruction if we find out? Of course, we collect. But is that why we're going to take out Saddam? No, that's nothing. That becomes long after we're in country. That becomes the narrative. And again, not based on any intelligence we were providing to them.
Wow.
So after you get out in 2008, right? Now what did you do after 2008? Because I have private, but I don't know what that means.
So I ended up for like the next 10 years while I was doing other stuff, because I wrote books during that time period and other things, working in a contract capacity for a bunch of other elements in the intelligence community. So DIA, NSA, mostly as an instructor. So mostly what I was doing was teaching other people to go downrange and do what I had been doing for a long time.
Right.
I was not working with CIA at that point. They just kind of drew a line there and said, I'm walking away. But so, for instance, about 5 years of that, I taught at what they call the Joint Counterintelligence Training Academy, which trains all the military counterintelligence agents for the United States. And I was basically the senior tradecraft instructor, which means I'm the guy teaching them how to work on the street, surveillance, counter surveillance, source handling, all the stuff that you would break down. So that's what I was doing for about a decade, working for them. And then also with elements of NSA and so forth.
So where along the way did your spidey sense start to perk up?
I feel like that was a really good pun that just got washed over. Your
What?
spidey sense.
Yeah, why?
Was it spy? But then like, it's great.
I like Peter Parker. Because it seems like we're at like this nexus in America right now, in the world. And I'm kind of curious, like, and I told you that like it was right around the first few months of COVID, where I'm like, something seems like it's rotten in Denmark, and I was blissfully ignorant to it and very unaware to it. So as somebody who has the expertise and the knowledge and the experience, when did your spidey sense start going, I see what's in my mind an ideology or a way of thinking that I think is anti-humanist in a way, and it's very terrifying to kind of game it out for the future, because you don't know where it's going to go, and there's a lot of fear and anxiety.
Right.
At what point were you like, hey, something's getting weird? I mean, was it 1988 or was it?
Well, no, I mean, as I said before, when we were talking about getting out of the agency, at the time I walked out the door from the agency, my primary focus was probably on what I was seeing in front of me every day operating overseas.
Sure.
Which is,
so it's like a myopic.
Well,
not like myopic.
And I've been out of the country at this point, realistically, for 20 years. I mean, I was in the country for periods of time, but when I was in the country, I'm learning a new language, or I'm going through a weapons course, or I'm going through something else. So all my focus is on getting ready for the next assignment and getting back out the door. So even when I'm back on U.S. soil, I'm kind of not back on U.S. soil, if you will, mentally. And when I got out of the agency, it was sort of, again, okay, because of what I'm seeing in front of me with all these issues. And then gradually over like the next 10 years, you begin to realize, okay, this is not just CIA, this is the whole U.S. government. And then there are dimensions of this. I think that intensified this awareness definitely over the last 5 years. And
personally for you,
me personally, yes. And I can remember vividly at some point, my wife and I standing in the kitchen of our home down in Maryland when we were still living down there, and literally looking at each other and saying, what happened to the country we were defending while we were away?
Well, I mean,
like all of us
to 2008,
like you're all of a sudden you're like, we just spent 20 years on the walls. Where's the country we left? What is going on here exactly? What is happening? And we finally got to the point, probably 5 years ago now, where we made the decision, okay, we're shutting down in DC. We're getting out of Washington. We're cutting free of this. We're cutting free of government contracts. We're all of this stuff. It took us a couple of years after that to realize that, in terms of finding a place and actually making the move. But so I don't know. I mean, I
was it one thing, or was it just like a collective?
No, it was definitely not one thing. I mean, and I suspect this is the way it is for a lot of people. You just all of a sudden realize, just a thing at a time, you realize, good Lord. I mean, the way I always put it to people is, we're talking about something, and I say to them, look, if you told me this 5 years ago or more than 5 years ago, I would have told you that's the plot of a bad novel. That's a bad conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
That's a grade B Hollywood movie. And now I know this to be absolutely true. Things that I never would have considered.
So is your tinfoil hat fitted or adjustable?
Definitely adjustable.
Come on, that was a good joke.
That was great.
That was a good joke.
It just took me a second because I wanted to hear his answer. So
because I gotta fit more conspiracies under there.
So can I do? I know that your official title is not spy, but it just makes for a better. If I do like Ask a Spy.
Yeah, cool.
Oh man, this is going to be great. Everything you ever wanted to know.
No, I don't. I want to move through this. I have a plan.
Oh, okay.
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 So
can I play Ask a Spy at the end?
yes, that's
okay. Thank you,
Dan. That's our game. Because sometimes we do a game just to keep it interesting.
Okay. Are there prizes?
High fives and I don't know salutations.
As many as you can grab, Jolly Ranchers. But once your hand is full, you can't get it out of the jar. It's like catching a raccoon.
I can pull up one of those games real quick if you want to. I mean, they're saved in our email. I don't know if today's the day though.
That's how they catch monkeys too.
Yeah,
with Jolly Ranchers.
With fruit in a jar.
Raccoons, you put something shiny in it that their hand can fit in, but once they grab the shiny, they can't, and they just stay there.
So when you and your wife had that like profound realization,
yeah.
What was like? So a lot of people that like I talk to, like I saw you speak at Moms for Liberty, and they always ask these questions like, what are we? They feel helpless, but at the same time they want to do something, and it's almost like they're a duck with the feet moving as fast as they can, and they're only moving real slow. What was it that you guys decided would be the most positive thing that you could do in the direction to actually just help people or come to an understanding yourself?
What I always say to people is the critical thing is do something.
Right.
Like stop. I mean, so as a generic response, like stop looking for the silver bullet. It's all of us together. And the answer is just figure out what you personally can do right now. Because everybody has something they can do right now. Go run for school board or support somebody running for school board. I made this decision, and again, it's probably one of these things where you can't fully articulate it at the time. I made this decision. I'm going to get off the sidelines and get involved. So the first thing I did was actually run for Congress down in Maryland.
Oh, no shit. Really?
Yeah. So
that's terrible to run for office.
Yes. So we went out and ran for Congress and got our heads handed to us down in Maryland, but learned a whole heck of a lot. And then after that, I just sort of plowed on into I'm just going to keep getting involved in every way I can, writing, talking, doing television, doing radio, organizing patriot groups, if that's the right term for them, all of that. I'm just going to keep moving. I don't know that I've yet sketched out the full game plan for how that all fits together. It's just anything and everything I can put my hands on that I feel like is making an impact, opening people's eyes and making the change. That's where I am. So
that's something that like I think especially, and I think the other guys in this room, Dan and Mike, I think that's what they just want people to not be afraid and have truth, know? And I think in something, I'm so, if I could be absolutely honest with you, I'm so tired of talking about COVID. But I think, for my generation, 9/11, before COVID, I was like 9/11 changed everything.
Right.
The moment 9/11 happened, it changed everything.
Right.
And now COVID is like, COVID changed everything. What do you see as the response to COVID and what has transpired since? It seems like there's this the best thing I can say is brainwashing of people's minds to it's like once you're afraid, now we're going to tell you everything that you should be afraid about, and you have to believe that, whether it's whether it's dudes driving through Christmas parades or whatever, which we never talked about after that. That was weird.
Right.
Or
whatever happened to the Chinese tennis player girl? Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember that.
It was all over world news. It was like the number
one. Oh, the one that disappeared.
That disappeared. She had accused a high-ranking member of the Chinese government of
assault.
Everywhere for 3 days. Not another word.
Well, there's a WNBA player who's stuck over there right now.
You can't criticize the Chinese Communist Party. That's rule number one.
I mean, look, they obviously they have good intentions.
We're making way too much money off of doing business with the Chinese Communist Party.
So is that where it started? because I hear people talk about like where it's like, 1986, 87, 88, like and I hate to say it, man, like the Chinese, I'm not talking about them as a people. I'm talking about the people in charge.
100% understand. And I add that caveat every time I utter the word Chinese as well. Let's be clear. The number one sufferers under the Chinese Communist Party are 1 billion Chinese people. They're the ones who wake up in a prison every day run by a totalitarian regime.
Or like 25 million in Shanghai right now.
So you're not helping the Chinese people by pulling your punches against the Chinese Communist Party. The best thing that could happen to them is overthrow them and install a democratic regime and actually have control over their destinies. But I never answered your question.
I don't even remember what the hell it was, Sam. So I think like I said, post COVID, right? And it seemed like it to me, like it was and thanks for somebody in my life like Micah and Dan, because I told you I was like a hardcore liberal when COVID happened, and then like Micah helped open my eyes. So did Dan. Dan's just really like sarcastic. He's like, yeah, that makes sense. So I was like, yeah, wait, that doesn't make sense.
Well, that's like a political ideology, sarcasm.
Is it? Yeah. Well, good, Dan. You should run for office.
Maybe next term. I don't know about right now.
My favorite part of all of COVID was about a month into it, once you, like, the blinders kind of came off for you a little bit. And you sent me a video of Reagan giving a speech. You're like, this guy's awesome. I'm like, how have you never heard of Ronald Reagan? Like, you were a crazy far left liberal.
I saw him ride a horse.
The actor?
What do you think was... Look, all the evidence is pointing towards a lab, and so far, but you can't discount it. It's like, there's, especially in your business, if somebody says a thing, you got, what's it, trust but verify.
Yeah.
There's a lot of evidence pointing to the lab thing. There's a lot of evidence pointing towards a bunch of people who seem to take advantage of this situation in ways that are detrimental to people's physical health, mental health, and the health of the country.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Look, if you're asking, first of all, in the origins of COVID, I don't think there's any significant question here. If you have any common sense, where did this thing come from? It came out of a lab in Wuhan, where
is that your assessment as an expert?
Yes, that's my assessment as the guy who used to run the terrorist weapons mass destruction unit for the Central Intelligence Agency. So my whole gig in my unit was to hunt chemical, nuclear, and radiological programs everywhere on the planet.
Oh, the Four Horsemen.
The Four Horsemen. Yes, yeah. I'm the guy who should be wearing the black cloak and carrying the scythe around, the Grim Reaper.
Oh, you're deaf.
But anyway, hi. That was the number one theory from the beginning, and every piece of evidence we have seen since says absolutely. Where this thing came from? Came out of Wuhan, where they're doing gain of function research on precisely this kind of virus. By the way, they're using a whole bunch of money that Dr. Fauci is pumping into their lab from the U.S. taxpayer money, even though Barack Obama told him to knock it off and there would be no more funding for gain of function research.
Right.
All he did was move it to China and pump the money through a third party.
It's like companies setting up in Delaware, so they don't have to pay the taxes. You know what I mean?
By the way, this Department of State, God help us, the Department of State's the ones producing the cutting edge intelligence in this. But for years prior to that, they were reporting Wuhan lab as a pandemic waiting to happen. It's a disaster. Their lab practices are horrible. Something's going to escape from there.
Yeah, the warning signs were all there from the State Department cables, weren't they?
Yes. And most recently, there have been more Department of State cables that have come out saying basically after the pandemic started, it says right there in the message traffic from the Department of State. And trust me, as an old CIA guy, having to credit the Department of State really sticks in my craw when I have to say that they're the ones producing the reporting, but God bless them, they were. And they just said right there, here are the possibilities. And the number one has to be it came out of Wuhan lab. And by the way, the only reason we can't confirm it is because the Chinese won't let us look. So that was crystal clear from day one. And everybody who's paying attention knows that and knows that we deliberately covered that up. I mean, I personally was thrown off of various social media platforms for writing an assessment saying that, and was told that the only way I'd be allowed back on is if I basically did a Chinese Communist Party style
atonement.
I had to stand up and write basically a retraction and atone for it's called a struggle session is what the CCP calls them. You have to stand up in front of the party and confess your sins and beg for forgiveness, and then they'll let you back in. Literally, I was told that that's what I got to do. And obviously I didn't do that.
Yeah.
But
you're not going to kowtow to Mao.
So all of that is crystal clear. And and it's a complete lie for a whole variety of reasons. And I agree with you 100% that COVID is then used as a justification to impose all sorts of controls for a broader purpose, not really health related at all. I mean, for me, I think the central struggle in this whole country right now is between the American people and this tiny minority of individuals, incredibly powerful and incredibly wealthy, and many of them in bed with the CCP in China, who basically want to run the country. Your job as a peon is to shut up and sit down and do what you're told. And these guys, with the help of big pharma and big tech and so forth, they just, they will allow you to maintain the outer appearance of a republic. You can go vote every once in a while to make yourself feel better and choose between a couple of bad choices.
Yeah.
But in terms of who actually runs the country, they're going to run the country. I mean, frankly, if you think about where we were with the robber barons and Theodore Roosevelt about 1900, I think we've come full circle, except that these guys are even richer. And these guys have toys now that nobody had in 1900. Like they control what you see every time you Google something on the internet. They control whether your posts are allowed to stay up. I mean, they have all kinds of capacities that nobody could dream of 120 years ago. I think that's where we are. And COVID is just part of that whole mess.
What I remember, clearly when COVID first became a reality, I mean, you saw images on the news, on TV, but then when it became an actual reality for us of, it's in America. I remember Tom Hanks. The first one was Tom Hanks getting it. It's like, oh no, an American's got it. And then I remember watching an NBA game and Rudy Gobert, he tested positive and they cleared the place out. And, and that's when it started to get kind of real. And like I said before, my son's a cancer survivor, so he's already got some residual respiratory things that he deals with. And when COVID first came here, I mean, I think pretty much everybody, except for I'm guessing maybe you, was terrified of it. This guy, I went to his house to go drop off something for his wife, and he wouldn't come within 30 feet.
I was wearing a dinosaur suit, those big T-Rex. No, I'm kidding. I wasn't wearing that.
He was literally at the sink just washing his hands. He's like, do not come over here. I was like, okay. It's not even in Pennsylvania yet. What are you doing? But still, my son wouldn't let him go do anything because we didn't want him to catch this. And
sure.
I remember there was two big things for me. Well, I guess number one, my question is, what was your response? What did you think when COVID first came? Were you I've seen this play out before, I know this game? Or did you have just kind of a general, all of us civvies over here just freaking out?
Well, I mean, I think when it first happened, I wasn't freaking out. I wasn't terrified. On the other hand, I was sort of all right, well, let's see exactly, let's watch the data and let's watch the information and let's see what actually develops here. How bad is this thing? And then pretty quickly it becomes crystal clear that this is a bad flu season. And unless you already have comorbidities. I mean, if you're, and things that really compromise your health, this is not really a big deal. And to the extent it is a big deal, there are available things like hydroxychloroquine that are cheap and generic. Don't
line the pockets of pharmaceutical companies.
Yes. Well, I mean, a good friend of ours is a guy named Dr. Hatfield. The kind of friends we have. So Dr. Hatfield was one of the guys. For many years, he was basically one of our leading biowarfare experts at Fort Detrick.
It's in Kentucky, right?
Just in Maryland.
I'm an idiot.
Frederick, Maryland. So that's his whole life's work, right? And he was actually called to the White House very early on. I'm talking March of, 2 years ago now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And to implement the National Pandemic Response Plan, which he wrote, by the way. So there is an actual existing plan for how to do this, because there are guys get paid to do this. So he was in the process of working on implementing that plan. And one of the first things they did was buy an enormous stockpile of hydroxychloroquine to begin not just treating people who had it, but prophylactically giving it to you in advance. That was the immediate reaction, because hydroxychloroquine is known to work, and it's generic and it's cheap, and they're going to buy it. And then they're going to implement all the other portions of the plan, which include things like nursing homes not only will not have COVID patients put there, but nursing homes will be isolated and quarantined from anybody with COVID, because we know in advance that's the most susceptible portion of the population, and we must protect them. So this is a very well thought out, professional, put together plan. Within about 30 to 60 days, don't hold me to the exact timeline,
Right.
Hatfield gets shoved out of the White House, and who arrives? This whole crew of people who are all basically coming directly from Big Pharma. And as soon as they arrive, hydroxychloroquine is forbidden. It is now evil, even though there's no science to support that. Everything other portion of the plan basically gets shoved off the table. That's when New York and Pennsylvania, everybody starts putting COVID patients into
nursing. I was just going
nursing.
to ask you that. I mean,
they start shoving them into nursing homes. So, which is, you're just a death sentence for these people, because that's the population you're worried about. And what is the only solution now that we can talk about to the entire thing? The vax, man. You can't treat them with generic pills and fix this. Only the experimental vaccine will save us, because only the experimental vaccine is going to make Big Pharma $1 trillion sold worldwide. And unfortunately, let's be fair, that all those decisions are made while Donald Trump is still sitting in the White House.
Yeah, I think, and that's the other thing too, where I see, people, look, my former side hated that man. They hated everything he stood for. They hated every policy he had. I mean, even though he gave tons of money to historically black colleges, he allowed former felons to vote, which is something that they didn't have. Like, it didn't matter. That was a bad guy. And, I remember when he did first talk about hydroxychloroquine and ultraviolet radiation, or ultraviolet light, that they put down your bronchial, what goes into your lungs, your bronchial tubes? I don't know, whatever.
Esophagus.
Whatever. No, it's for food. But the news was like, oh, he's a quack, he's this, he's that. And it's like, oh, there is a company that actually does clean your lungs out with ultraviolet radiation. Oh, hydroxychloroquine is known as a zinc. I think it's a zinc ionophore is what they call it.
It works.
Or if it doesn't work, it doesn't kill. It doesn't, there's no.
It's used all over the planet for all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's an anti-malarial. It was given to us basically like peanuts when we were overseas.
Yeah.
I didn't take it because the version we had, or the derivative we had, in some people causes crazy like
dreams,
like
Chantix,
acid-induced dreams, and you just don't get any freaking sleep. And awesome. after I'd done that for about 2 nights, I'm like, okay, I'm waking up exhausted. I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But the point is exactly what you said. It doesn't hurt you. It is not a dangerous thing.
It is cheap.
It's okay. Let's move on from that, because I could go for 4 hours about how I think and I hate to say this, but it's the only time in history where there was a one size fits all silver bullet for what the coronaviruses are colds. They come from the common cold. Every Lest oil wipe or whatever they have, or what are they called? Is it Lest oil? That's what you cook with. Lysol. I'm an idiot, but it all says prevents against.
I was 99. Fine with Lest oil.
Yeah, I was so confused.
His counters are really slick.
He's been licking it,
but it says kills coronaviruses. Says all that stuff. Right. I knew people who for 5 months were microwaving their mail. I don't understand how in hindsight reasonable people can't look back and say, I think we left the starting line at the wrong place, and maybe they can go, that's okay. But once you find out, like, some of these things, common sense makes sense. Like I shit you not, in the last 3 weeks, 2 of my uncles have been diagnosed with cancer. I don't know the odds of that, right?
Right.
And I sent them. I ran across this guy named I think it's Joe Tippins. He claims that this antiparasitic called fenbendazole alleviated his cancer, right? So my tinfoil hat's adjustable. I send this to my mother, who sends it to her brother, and then my dad's friend has cancer. He sends it to him. My dad doesn't realize that the next day his buddy has an oncology appointment, right? So my family, a fourth of my family thinks I'm nuts. The other 75 are kind of with me. And my dad's friend calls him that day and he's like, so the oncologist, I mentioned fenbendazole thinking I was going to get laughed at. She said, yes, it's a thing. Yes, they do studies on it. Yes, they stop the studies because it's cheap. And if you want to take it, go for it. It ain't going to hurt you.
Right.
So for me, for everybody with the fear of COVID, right? If hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin can increase your chances by 1%, is it not worth it?
100%. Look, we have never responded to a disease before by withholding therapeutic treatment. I came down with COVID very early on, Mike. And I contacted a doctor. What happened to me? Same thing happened to everybody else around that time.
Can't treat it.
They said, don't come in. If you get to the point where the symptoms are so bad, they gave me sort of benchmarks, then go to the hospital and they'll put you in the ICU. What disease in history have you ever responded to by saying, we won't treat you until you get to the point where you're about to die, and then we'll take you to the emergency room and stick a hose down.
When it's too late.
Hose down your throat. Yeah, exactly. Wait until it gets really, really bad. And then when you're about to die, go to the hospital and walk in the emergency door. That's insane. And that's precisely what both my wife and I were told.
How does
I can't tell if I'm crazy or if everybody else is crazy.
How do people in their minds square that? How do people in their minds say?
I don't know. Well, look, we were told. I laid out this chronology of what happened to Dr. Hatfield, and all of a sudden, the only solution is vaccine. Okay, what were we told about vaccines? You were told
they work.
You'll never get work. COVID. Yeah. Common sense stuff. You're going to get vaccinated. You won't get COVID.
And you won't transmit it.
Okay, and you won't transmit it. And now and then we went through the various phases, and now people that have been vaxxed twice and boosted and everything else are coming down with COVID, and maybe coming down with COVID more than once. And they're still manufacturing rationales for why you should continue to get injected with something that at a minimum, before we even get to negative health effects, which I think are real, before we even get to that, at least we could all agree, it would seem to me objectively, they don't work, right? Like you're injecting me with something that clearly is not stopping me from getting the disease. So why am I getting it?
I saw a meme, and because I'm an internet kid, and the meme was, if I got 3 smallpox vaccines in the same year and still got smallpox, I'd be talking to somebody. I'd be asking questions. I don't understand how, people, when the iPhone first came out, there was a lot. I lived in LA at the time. And you know what a lot of those LA people said? I'm going to wait till they work the bugs out on it.
Right. But
that was for a goddamn phone.
But not with the vaccine.
Yeah, but then you go, okay, I can't. My whole thought process during the whole thing was, I don't want to buy a shitty iPhone because then I can't return it, right? I can't unvaccinate myself.
Right.
I don't know what's in it. There's this polyglycol, whatever that's in there. That's the thing that Aaron Rodgers is allergic to. There's a bunch of, they don't have the ingredients. One of the biggest profound things to me was when they opened up the package inserts and it was the size of a goddamn map in a high school classroom that was blank. This is supposed to be your safety data for the thing that you're injecting into yourself. And y'all signed off on it, and it said, this is only approved for emergency use only, and blah, blah, blah. And everyone's like, I got to take it because as a guy who basically for his whole career dealt with human nature.
Right.
How does everybody go along with it?
And why, and how do so many people continue to go along with it? Right. Because
that's a big question.
Because I could get it that, okay, some people are just in this mode of, I'm just going to trust the authorities, whatever the heck that means. But at this point, at this point, you don't have to read an article. Everybody in their own life probably knows a whole host of people who have been fully vaccinated, again, whatever that means, and have gotten COVID.
Yeah.
So at a minimum, you know that it was a lie and it doesn't work. Again, before we get to negative health effects or anything else, which I'm not dismissing, why would you then continue to get any boosters? And why would that not now impact the way you process additional information? If you have now established, based on evidence right in front of you, that you were lied to bald face about all of this stuff, why would you continue to believe anything the same authorities are telling you? Be like, yeah, dude, I took the vaccine. I took the second vaccine. I did this. I got COVID. So did this person. So did that person. So did my cousin. I think maybe I'm going to pause on listening to you for a while, Do
you think it's out of I think that the reason that this played out so well over the past 2 years is because, in my humble opinion, the strongest emotion is not love, it is fear. I think when you make somebody afraid, they'll do things that are unimaginable. So I think that's kind of, it's why I shut my business down out of fear, whether it's fear of COVID or whether it's fear of the police showing up and arresting me. I shut down my business out of fear. Like you said, now at this point, 2 years later, if we just go through the list, masks don't work unless it's an N95.
Yes.
The vaccines either don't work or they don't work like they were promised. We know that 100% to be true.
Right.
I don't know enough about it to sit here and say that they don't work at all. I think they do. I think that they've helped some people, but they obviously do not work even remotely like they promised. Even down to just like outside of COVID over the past 2 years, just the amount of lies that have come out of Washington, D.C. Even down to like right now, the big thing is Hunter Biden's laptop. And it was just Russian information, Russian collusion, it's all, everything that we've been told from a political worldview, COVID, put it all into one big basket. It's all been untrue. All of it.
Yes.
And I think that at the end of the day, people would rather just keep going along with it because ignorance is bliss. And if I just keep towing the line, or maybe
it'll get better.
An emotional mask that they're wearing now. Like, I can't believe I fell for this for 2 years. I'm just going to keep going. And, I don't know what the reason is, but to me, it's one of the scariest things I've ever seen. Like I'm a student of history. I love to look back at history and I'm like, this is how empires fall.
Yes.
Like, this is what happened to Rome. This is why. Even down to some of the cultural things that are happening right now. I mean, you look at what's happening in some of the conversations about CRT, about, transgender rights, like all of these things. And it's like, we are tearing ourselves apart from the inside and nobody seems to be noticing. I mean, people like, I'm guessing us, but like we were lied to about pretty much everything over the past 2 years. And we still everybody, the majority of the population just keeps going along with it. And that's what I said before. Like, I feel like either I've lost my mind completely or everybody else has. And I don't know know where true north is anymore.
Sam, are we crazy?
Then we're all crazy together.
Oh, good.
Good. At least us in this room.
Well, I think there are a lot of people that are either awake or are awakening.
Yeah.
And then there are people maybe at the other end of the spectrum, if that's the right analogy, that they don't, they're the problem. They are pushing the agenda that we're fighting against. I believe, you touched on something that I think is very real, which there are a lot of people in the middle who kind of just don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this is always true on things political, and generically, I would say this is, it's the kitchen table issue. It isn't until the kitchen table issues really hit them that they care. Where it's kind of where we are now, when gas prices go through the roof and you can't fill up your pickup truck anymore.
Right.
And you're not sure you can buy groceries next week and you can't, then it starts getting real to you. But generically, you'd rather just turn off the news, turn on a reality TV show. And and I don't mean that to sound disparaging, right? You got kids to take care of. You got a job. You're trying to pay the rent. You got
Just
real
trying to get
work.
by.
You're just trying to friggin' deal with the reality of life. And you don't have any time to really go research all this stuff on your own. And you
That's
probably,
where Marky comes in.
and you probably don't need the depression and the heartache and the heartburn. I mean, I got a brother who's a very educated guy, still works for the government, who no longer watches the news at all. Right?
I don't blame him.
And I get exactly why. He's like, because I'm sure we've all got relatives where you talk to them and you start talking to them about these kind of issues, and they've never heard about anything that you're mentioning to them because they have just cocooned themselves. It's a big problem though, because I don't, stick with the COVID example. I don't personally subscribe to the notion that COVID was deliberately released from the Wuhan lab.
Oh, that takes off one of my Ask a Spy.
That doesn't mean I'm guaranteeing you it wasn't, because at this point,
intentional question mark.
At this point, I'm not going to cross anything off the list. But personally, I don't think that's how this happened right now. But I certainly do think, in line with what we've been saying, is that once the opportunity presented itself to use this thing to push a pre-existing agenda, that a whole bunch of people said, oh yeah, we're jumping on top of this, man. This gives us the opportunity. I mean, every governor, well, not every governor, but a whole bunch of governors in the state, including one right here in PA, said, wow, I can all of a sudden become the king instead of the governor. I can just say it's an emergency, man. Therefore, I have all sorts of authorities that nobody ever gave me somehow magically fell from the sky.
Yeah, it's very interesting that it's
never let a good tragedy go to waste.
It's very interesting that it's Governor Wolf. Just saying. I want you mentioned something about agendas, and I think, oh, thanks for cleaning me like a mountain gorilla,
like a monkey.
And I think you're right. I think in my mind, I don't think there's any way to disprove any of that, because the Chinese won't let you look, and the American government doesn't seem too eager to push them on it. So I don't think we'll ever know. It definitely wasn't a pangolin. But when you say agenda, there is opportunists. There is what was that? What was that earthquake or the tsunami on Christmas Day? What was that? Tide over in India. It was like the Indian Ocean or something like that. They made a movie about it, because that's my whole frame of reference is entertainment.
Maybe Indonesia.
The Indonesian, it killed 250,000 people.
Yeah.
Immediately after that, it was like, we're getting rid of we're building condos, we're doing this, we're doing that. Never let the tragedy go to waste.
Yeah, exactly.
So as far as like when you say agenda, and Micah earlier mentioned like CRT, gender fluidity. I mean, is that what came in, and is that like the ultimate goal? Like, is the ultimate goal is like every day's a gay pride parade? Or I don't understand why these are the things that they're pushing, especially when we live in Scranton, right?
Right.
Not every block is Greenridge, and Greenridge is a very affluent part of town.
Right.
We neglect everybody else. It's not almost like it is. There's the haves and the have-nots, and the haves tend to do things that make them feel good, and the have-nots tend to not participate in the process because they've been shit on the whole time.
Right.
So what is this agenda that they're trying to get in, as you see it as a professional in government and the Central Intelligence Agency, and everybody's like, there's going to be people who are going to say, once a spy, always a spy. How do you know that you're not given disinformation? How do you not know?
That's the only reason I'm here as an infiltrator. I came.
Thank you. I want to make sure that three of us are lied to.
That actually is my operation.
I said, Sam, I don't care if you lie. Just tell a good goddamn story.
I said, get up to Scranton and infiltrate this shit. That's
like the schools. That CRT stuff.
Are you Irish? That's the first question. Because if you're going to infiltrate here, you have to be Irish.
The illusion.
Scottish, actually, originally.
Close enough.
Even better.
You were shit on too.
I mean, the Scots are the ones that do all the work. The Irish are the ones that have all the fun. That's the way that breaks down.
Oh, that's because we're sad and we drink. But like the CRT stuff, like we had somebody on our podcast from the Scranton school. He was running for school board, and I kind of mentioned the CRT thing. He's like, doesn't exist, not real. And I wanted to push back on it, but I didn't have all the evidence in front of me, because immediately when you say, yeah, man, that's kind of real, they're immediately, prove it.
It's very real.
So can you explain what it is and how it is being used and why?
CRT or the broader agenda?
So let's just start with CRT, because the broader agenda we'll save that for the dessert.
Yeah, let's get through CRT, gender fluidity, if you will.
Well,
and then
this is the way I break it down for people. I mean, CRT is an outgrowth of Marxist ideology. That's not and I say that as a guy who, when he started his career undercover, the groups we were working against were primarily European Marxist-Leninist groups that were going around shooting our diplomats and so forth. So I've spent more than my share of time hanging out around the coffee houses with Marxist-Leninists, having to get immersed in the madness of the ideology. So I know a little bit about that topic. So I don't say that as just some throwaway expression. CRT is an outgrowth of Marxist ideology, but nobody wants to hear about Marx. God knows it'll, you'll be brain damaged. It's horrifying stuff. The way I break it down for people is this: we as a country, for at least since the 50s and the civil rights movement, have basically had a national consensus that what we want is a colorblind society.
Yeah, I agree.
What we're moving toward is, however imperfectly in fits and starts and all that stuff, a society like Martin Luther King would have said, where you're judged by, your character,
not the color of your skin.
Not the color of your skin. And everybody's generally in agreement with that. Again, we can argue about how well we're implementing that and so forth. But that's the goal, right? Jobs, employment, buy a house, whatever the heck it is. Your race does not determine that, okay?
Should not.
Right, should not. That's our goal. That's our objective.
Right.
I'm not suggesting we have somehow achieved perfection and we got there. There are not issues. Not suggesting that at all. But we are all generally in agreement that that's where we want to be. CRT is a completely alternative way of looking at this, which actually was very prevalent back in the 60s and 70s, not necessarily publicly under that name, which is essentially, there's no hope of doing that. The nation is fundamentally flawed. It's an inherently racist nation. White people are inherently racist. You really can't get rid of that. The best you can do is struggle against it. Basically, this is an evil, corrupt system from Jump Street. And therefore, and then there are a series of solutions that come out of that, depending on who you are. Some of them involve creating literally black homelands. We're going to have we're going to take Texas, and Texas is now the black United States of America, and that's where black people live. White people get out. I mean, these are literal proposals. In fact, Texas is one of the places that has been proposed for that.
They're actually doing proposals about stuff like that?
I don't know that the people in Texas are aware of that, But in any event, there's that, and then there's generally the sort of idea that, okay, fine, we're not going to do that, but we have to just accept that America is inherently racist and inherently bad, and then whatever we're going to do, whether that's reparations, whether that's whatever consequence. But it is it's 180 degrees out from the idea that what we're shooting for is a colorblind society. We are shooting for a society where color is
everything.
And now layered on top of that, of course, with intersectionality, which basically means you're disadvantaged in more than one way. If you are black, you're being beat up by the system. If you're a black woman, you're being beat up by the system 2 times. If you're a black trans person, I guess you're being beat up by the system. I don't know how many times that counts. But the whole policy is we're not ever getting to a colorblind society. That's not the goal. We're dividing the society, and this will determine everything. And if you are part of the white elite, and everybody who's white is elite. Everybody. You are an oppressor, and you better be apologizing for that and paying for that and making amends for that. And there is no end to this, by the way. You can't ever get this out of the system. Again, we're not like going to hire more black people at the fire department to even out, because we think there's been a discrimination in the past, and then get past this and move forward. This is a new structure. So the goal is, that's what critical race theory is, that you moved this, and it has obviously infected the schools and infected colleges and infected universities. If you ask me what the ultimate goal of this is the goal of all Marxist ideology, which is to tear your society apart. How Marxists destroy the society is by finding cleavage points. The original idea with Marx and Engels was the cleavage point is between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, because it was 1840s in industrial Western Europe.
Right.
Okay. Mao turned that into peasants versus whoever in his version in communist China. The new version is to divide all of America into separate tribes based on as many cleavage points as you can identify. Black against white, gay against straight, trans against everybody. I don't know. I mean,
is the purpose of that we're all down here punching while they're up there ruling? Like,
yes. Okay. Yes, because you tear the society apart. And also, I mean, there's another element that, since I threw into the mix things like the sort of gender fluidity idea, there is an express element here to destroy the family unit, which again is a hallmark of Marxism, because if you look at every such totalitarian government, the number one bulwark against totalitarian control is the family unit, what we would now call, what's now known as the patriarchy, right?
So that would be almost like the immunity to whatever crazy ideas are coming down.
And
natural immunity.
So you can't have mom and dad telling their kids, mom and dad can't raise their kids. Mom and dad can't, infect them with their own ideas and their own ideology. The state has to take control of that, right? Which is increasingly what's happening with things like CRT and the transgender movement in schools. I'm kind of an old school liberal, right? Live your life. The essence of me the essence of the American sense of liberty to me is the right to be let alone.
Right.
Get out of my business. Leave me alone. My wife, my kids, my property. We raise, which I think is how most Americans feel. This is the antithesis of this, right? And especially when you get down to things like talking to your kids about gender fluidity, sex, gender roles. You're like, man, what? I'm supposed to be teaching my kid about how to read and write and do arithmetic, not
and critically think about Chaucer.
And yeah, exactly. How about educate them, man? Figure out what they're saying in Chaucer would be nice. First of all, that whole medieval English thing.
Have you heard the horseshoe theory?
I don't know what that is.
The horseshoe theory is, and I got this from TikTok. It's very deep.
Okay.
Thanks, China.
The horseshoe theory
we just went from Chaucer to TikTok in like 5 seconds.
Welcome to 2022, Sam.
Guys.
It's great. The horseshoe theory is that, humanity, when it comes to a political or worldview, you might go right or left. And but eventually, when you go to the far extremes, you're going to come back together to the same place. And the best example is the Baptist and the bootlegger. The Baptist thinks that alcohol is a sin, so they want it banned. They don't want it because it's wrong, it's horrible. The bootlegger doesn't want legal alcohol because they make their living by bootlegging. And these two people that have completely opposite worldviews, at the end of the day, come back to the same place where they want alcohol to be illegal, even though they're completely two different things. And when I heard this, it was like, this all makes sense, and so, we have this. Then you have BLM Incorporated and the KKK, two seemingly opposite ends of the spectrum, come back to the same place, because at the end of the day, when you're an ideological extremist, you're going to come back to segregation, which is what we have.
Right.
And it's so crazy to me because like you said, like I consider myself a classic liberal. I always identified that way. Now it's like I feel like I don't even have a home.
Right.
In modern American politics. It's like we should all agree, no matter how you feel about it, we should all agree that an adult has the right to love, marry whoever they want to, as long as they're another legal adult.
100%.
That's not controversial. It shouldn't be controversial.
Right.
But I think we should all agree that teachers should not be talking to 6-year-olds about sex.
Right.
And the fact that they're getting so up in arms about it is really scary. Like, why are you so upset that you're not allowed to talk about sex with 6-year-olds? That shouldn't be controversial.
I'm just going to, I thought this the other day, and I was like, to be a cop, right? You have to get like all these different certificates, accreditations,
right.
And you get like your I do some work with the college sometimes, and I see teachers who you're not accredited.
Right.
You're talking about things, and you're talking to children about things that are confusing to a lot of people, and
Right.
and there was no certificate or accreditation anywhere in the state policy, the local policy, the federal policy to say that you can discuss that. Like, you got to go to school to teach geometry,
Right.
but when it comes to like gender, which is so, children don't understand why butterflies fly. You're going to start telling them that they are not who they are, and I just think it's really wild. Like, if you're 18, I don't care what you do. Don't hurt people. Don't hurt kids.
Right.
As long as you're happy, you have the right to pursue that in America.
Yeah, but you also keep your hands off. I mean, when you and I first met, I think I was doing a presentation with a group involved in, and one of the things we were talking about, I think we were probably talking mostly COVID issues at that, but we talked some about CRT. But at the beginning of any presentation like that, one of the first things I try to say very loudly and very clearly to everybody, because we're basically talking to parents, is we're not here to make any decisions for you about your kids or tell you what you have to do with your kids. Our central principle is they are your children. You're in control. You should make the decision. All we're here to do is educate you about what we think. And obviously we have our own opinions. But at the end of the day, I typically also say, if at the end of the day, after you go do some research and you decide that Sam Faddis doesn't know what the heck he's talking about, awesome. Good. And you want to go a completely different direction. You're the dad, you're the mom, take charge.
Thank you for listening, though.
Yeah. And obviously, and I'm not going to hide what I think my opinions are and what I think you should do. But at the end, what I'm saying very clearly is nobody's here to order you to or force you to do anything. When you're talking about these teachers, increasingly, we don't have an agreement with them on that same principle. It's not just that they're talking about things that they're not qualified to talk about. They don't agree with the way you're raising your children, and they do, in fact, believe they have a right to fix that in their mind.
Air quote, fix that.
Absolutely. So you believe that there are two genders. You don't really care how people live their lives if this guy wants whatever he wants to do. But the bottom line is you believe that there are men and women, and you don't really buy this whole thing about most of what is pushed as transgender ideology. That's your personal belief, and you're raising your kids in accordance with that belief. Now, that teacher increasingly doesn't agree with you and doesn't accept the principle that it's none of their business and they should stay out of it. And that's what the parent's job is, to raise their kids. So they're going to do everything they can to teach that child something completely different from what you believe. And increasingly what you find in the schools is they will then deliberately hide this from the parents. In other words, they not only are doing it and know what they're doing, but they're completely cognizant of the fact that if you tumble to what they're doing, there's probably going to be hell to pay, and therefore they will hide this from you. And so all across the country, parents are discovering Johnny goes to school, and at school they now call him Susie. And Johnny changes into girls' clothes at school. And
is that really happening?
Yes. So again, I'm all about individual liberty, and you grow up and you're an adult and live your life and whatever. And I'm not trying to be pejorative in any other sense. I'm just saying, if that's my kid and I'm raising my kid and then I'm going off to school and you're pumping some ideology that you personally subscribe to in his head that I don't, I think that's a problem. But that is where we are. And it's back to, I think, the agenda here is destroy the existing social structure, unfortunately.
What's the goal? So why would they want to destroy the social?
Well,
so I
talked before about this idea, I use this analogy of like we're sort of fighting against what I call an oligarchy, the modern day robber barons. One of the things that has happened, in addition to the fact that in 120 years, these folks now have technology and capabilities they didn't have 120 years ago, is that a lot of these structures in our society are now infused with what is really at its root a Marxist ideology. And again, I don't throw that around that word around
flippantly. Yeah.
So, I mean, if you think 120 years ago, imagine somebody, I don't know, Andrew Carnegie or whatever, he might have, whatever you think of him, you would probably think of guys of that generation at that time in history as being very much pro-American democracy. Well, not necessarily democracy, but in industry, capitalism, so forth.
Yeah.
They would definitely not be in bed with a foreign power. Now, they might treat their workers like garbage and pay them nothing and be guilty of all kinds of things. I'm not painting over that, but I'm just saying you would assume this guy's on some level kind of as red, white, and blue as you could imagine. He's all about the United States. Increasingly, if you look at the folks that hold control in this country, they really have access to massive amounts of money. You are not talking about those people anymore that think like that anymore. You are talking about folks that have absorbed this ideology, which is really very anti-American. It's basically, we are the problem for everything on the planet. I mean, the Steve Jobs' widow, so she inherited his fortunes. I think she got
like a house and a car, maybe.
Yeah, maybe 2 houses. She's got, I think,
a little bit more than was.
I think she's.
So you're saying she's single?
I think she's the 3rd richest woman on the planet.
What?
So she has a foundation, and her foundation is dedicated basically to open borders. Her entire life's mission is eliminating the southern border. And the person who was running that foundation up until Joe Biden entered the White House now sits in the White House as a special assistant to Joe Biden. And her entire portfolio is our policy on immigration and control of the southern border. So the lady who was running the foundation with Steve Jobs' money dedicated to eliminating our southern border, as soon as Joe steps into the White House, moves in as the special assistant, and she writes our policy on the southern border, which I think answers pretty much every question about what you've seen from Joe Biden on the southern border ever since he sat down. They are implementing now the plan straight out of this foundation. This is the widow of one of the biggest American capitalists in history with ungodly sums of money. And her life's work is erasing our southern border, allowing unlimited immigration and pouring illegal workers into the United States.
Is the end goal globalism?
Yeah, I mean, these folks don't think in terms of nation states, and they also don't think in terms of, look, America has a share of problems, right? Nobody's making pretense that we are perfect. Good Lord, no, that we don't have work to do. Nobody's suggesting that. But, I think most of us feel like, okay, but better than all the alternatives, right? Tell me where you would rather be.
Right.
I mean, these folks have no problem with climbing in bed with communist China, but at the same time, will spend massive amounts of money waging war on us, in effect.
What? Sorry, Sam. A lot of it is
Was that too depressing?
Sometimes the truth has to be.
It's reality. Well, and it's reality. And the thing that makes it depressing is that it feels like not enough people are aware of it. And as soon as you say it, the go-to now is, you're a racist, xenophobic, insurrectionist,
homophobe,
whatever. Like, and it's like, no, like, I don't know. Like, it's so bizarre to me that the same people that think that we should have no borders between countries are the same people that are freaking out about Russia and Ukraine right now. Like,
yeah, right.
You can't have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, we should worry about Ukraine's border, but not our own. Yeah.
Yeah, like, I just don't understand.
Isn't that wild?
They're also, by the way, when you drive through the neighborhoods where they live, where those folks live that are pushing
in Ukraine,
you're not going to in the United States.
Okay.
Some upscale neighborhood. Tell me how many United States Marine Corps flags or U.S. Army flags you got flying on the front porch.
Right.
In other words, their kids are not the ones who go to
fight and die.
Iraq, Afghanistan, and they either come home in a coffin or come home with no legs and all of that stuff. They're all for getting involved in foreign entanglements, but they're not going to pay the price for it.
Well, it's like Congress. It's like at a 500 and some members of Congress, there's like 5 who have their kids in the armed services or something like that. Like they don't, and they're making decisions about my neighbor's kids and.
Well, since we talked about history before, and you mentioned the Roman Republic. Here's a Roman Republic analogy, right? There's a battle between the Roman Republic and Hannibal back in 200 BC or whatever. Cannae. It was a disaster for the Romans, even though they ultimately won the war. 60 members of the Roman Senate died on the field of battle that day out of 100. Now think about that. That's 60 Roman senators, and the Senate really ran the Roman Republic, who were in armor with swords in their hand on the field of battle defending the Republic. Again, didn't go the way they wanted, but that gives you a glimpse of how they looked at, the whole society was on the field of battle contributing. Yeah, that's not where we are now.
Well, I mean, you look at what's in Congress, in the House.
I don't really want to see Chuck Grassley with an AK.
That's the thing. It's like those guys, apart from maybe one or two, couldn't punch their way out of a wet paper bag.
Yeah, right.
It's just I don't know.
It's
now I feel like I need a drink.
Like 35,000 foot view. A lot of it seems like, they're trying to confuse everybody so that they don't know what to believe. They don't know who to trust. And when you don't, how terrifying of a position is that? Like, if you don't know who to trust and you don't know where to get your information from, because look, nobody has, you do this for a living, right? I do this because I was non-essential. I had nothing else to do. And I was like, I need to figure out whether I'm going to fucking die. It seems like they're trying to confuse the shit out of everybody. So I think it makes people complacent. I think when you're so, I don't know. You see people do this all the time. Like they throw the papers in the air. They're like, I have no idea.
What did they do to get, what did you guys probably do to get information from people when you needed it in Iraq? You confuse them. You keep them awake.
Well, that's what they did to you
play
too.
Loud music. It's what you do.
Well, it's look, I would say to you that I think, however we got here, this whole issue with people not knowing what to believe, I think is a massive problem. We get folks contacting us all the time, whether that's just personally or with the magazine or whatever it is, and they're presenting something that, honestly, they ask me a question, and my first reaction is I want to start laughing.
Right, but you have to
because it's just, frankly, it's just a nonsensical thing.
Yeah, like the Giants in Afghanistan.
But then I'm like, no, those are real. But
I told you.
Wait.
I told you. No, stay. Keep moving on.
But then
I'm putting on that. Ask a spy list.
Right. Am I crossing off the list already?
You've done a couple.
But then I catch myself and I'm like, I get it, because you have been lied to so much by so many people for so long. How the heck are you supposed to figure out anymore? Especially the average person who is not doing this, like you say, full time. How are you supposed to figure out what is real? I
think when people start questioning their reality, it's a scary place to be as a human being, because that affects everything. It affects how you vote, how you handle your kids, what you do at your job, what you eat at night.
I think for us too, though, it's a big thing. Like we're level-headed guys, right? So we sit here and we see things with our own two eyes, and then we're told something completely different, and then so you multiply that out to everybody who kind of is seeing these things. And that creates confusion for us who we think, oh, we got this, it's okay. We're just riding through. We'll get through this. But they're even making us question certain things that are just so simple answers that it's right there in front of you. But nope, still got you kind of putting the screws to you a little bit.
Yep. Especially with our kids. Cause I always say, first of all, I don't want to let this go unnoticed. Your boots look amazing. By the way, I noticed that. You look great. I think for me as a parent, my wife and I joke about it. We always say we're not trying to raise a good 15-year-old or an 18-year-old. We're trying to raise a good adult. We said that since they were 2 and 3 and 4. Our job is to not screw up our kids. Raise good adults. And if you are so confused as to what is the right way to talk to your kids about, just to use an example, like LGBTQ issues, okay? Because I want my kids to be empathetic, loving, caring, accepting human beings. That is a good adult. But at the same time, too, what am I supposed to explain to my daughter about Leah Thomas? What am I supposed to say to her? As somebody who,
a good man has defeated you again.
I mean, it's just as somebody
I didn't mean that,
who,
the world. I didn't mean that.
He said it, not me.
Yeah.
But as somebody who would, I hate when guys are like, I'm a male feminist. No, you're just trying to get laid. But so I hate that.
You're a creep.
Yeah. But I mean, listen, I have a daughter, I have a wife. Every single person I employ, every single one of them female, I'm as pro-woman as they come. Feminism is dead if we keep going down this road. Women's rights are over. lock them back in the kitchen, pregnant and barefoot. It's done.
How does nobody realize that the women's rights movement on that
It's
is
done.
It is. It's look. There's also this is I think a good point because it illustrates something else that's going on right now. If you think about civil rights, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are black people asking for? What have they been asking for? I mean, let's just say
treat us the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to change anything about what you're doing. What I'm saying is, I'd like to be able to buy a friggin' house in your neighborhood, and you tell and not tell me it's not okay. And I'd like to actually apply for a job and get judged on my merit.
Right.
What are women asking for? Ultimately, the same thing. What were gay people saying?
Yeah, we just want to be able to get married.
I want to be able to live my life and have all the same opportunities, which includes marriage and with all the legal implications as you. If you think about where we are right now, that is not what is happening with, you are not being asked to say that this guy doesn't want to consider himself male or female and live his life accordingly. You're not being asked. What you're being told is that you actually have to change. The whole society has to change. Everybody else has to adopt this, right? And it becomes, instead of just a request for equality, it becomes an attack. And this is where we are with Chapman, right? This guy who, is a mediocre swimmer at UPenn and all of a sudden announces he's female.
Or Leah Thomas.
I'm sorry.
You said Chapman. I don't know what that means. Yeah.
Chapman's another
one?
another reprehensible person, but that's a totally different subject. You're right.
I didn't know about Chapman.
Yeah, you're right.
Did he shoot somebody?
Is
John Lennon.
Is he the one who was trying to be an ATF guy?
Might have been.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, Thomas. So no, I'm not just saying I want equality. I'm actually going to, if you follow this, exactly what you guys are saying, I'm attacking everything. I'm attacking women's sports. I'm requiring you to change everything about the way you do things, compete, structure, and I don't care. And in this very strange way, it doesn't matter that it negatively impacts every female swimmer in the United States of America who probably been going to swim practice since they were 6 years old.
Just as a silver Olympian,
sweating blood.
Yeah,
just to get into shape for that is insane.
Killer, right? One of the toughest sports in the world, and you're competing at some place like UPenn, or for that matter, competing against UPenn, and all of a sudden, this agenda for this one individual is more important than what it does to you. Yeah, it's definitely it's an attack on feminism. It's an attack on women, frankly. If you follow it to its logical conclusion, it sort of erases women. It's like they don't even really exist anymore. If I'm a guy and I tell you that I'm now female and change my name, I'm now supposed to be able to demand that everybody else behave as if that's real.
It is like I had this conversation with my son yesterday or the day before. I can't remember. He came in. He's like, "Yeah, did you see that article about that swimmer?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like we've been talking about this for a month. How are you just now hearing it?" But having this conversation with him, and he's like, "Okay, help me understand this." And again, like I was saying to you, Dan, like trying to how do I not screw up this kid? He's an 18-year-old boy. He does enough dumb stuff on his own. I can't make it worse. And trying to explain to him, and by the end of the conversation, literally his last thing that he said to me, he goes, "Wait, so you're telling me people out there think that men can get pregnant?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "This world's a stupid place." I was like, "Yeah." Like, it's just so unbelievable to me.
But so when you think
people are just going along and but you're a monster if you don't say that men
So I would
can get
ask
pregnant.
this question. Why would people why would any group to what benefit would it be, if minus penguins, you don't really see a lot of birds swimming deep into the water. Why would they be telling me that all birds can swim deep into the water? And I know that will kill them.
That's a great analogy.
Why is that?
Are we talking about birds now?
Well, what's a euphemism or something? I don't know what's the word for that. I'm talking about why would they be telling me that something that objectively I know not to be true?
Well,
what's the end game there?
The end game, in my opinion, is the ideological end game. A lot of people are just going to go along with this because it's the current shtick, right? It's the current pop thing. This is how you show that you're
woke,
cool, and woke, and all of this. From an ideological standpoint, what's the end game? The end game is the destruction of what I'm going to call just traditional society. And again, I'm not somebody, I don't necessarily consider myself in a lot of ways traditional, and I haven't lived really a particularly traditional life in a lot of ways. But you're breaking down the basic building blocks of society, if you think about it, right?
Make it weak.
Yeah, you're destroying it. There's nothing that stands between the power of whatever ruling class there is and the individual anymore. And in all totalitarian governments in history, destroying the family unit has been crucial. It's not just a communist thing. Nazi Germany, right? What's the deal?
Throughout history, they've done it.
All throughout history. Get the kids to rat out on their parents, swear allegiance to the party. That's where they look to for their guidance. This is not a new thing. It's not like somebody just invented it, right? You break down, gender roles don't exist. There are no men. There are no women. There is no family. Pretty soon, simultaneously, you control the flow of information. You can only say certain things. If you say the wrong thing, you're silenced. You run all of these trend lines out. Where do you end up? I mean, I know this sounds like, again, this is one of those things where it's like if somebody
sounds like an Outer Limits episode.
If somebody started talking to me about this X number of years ago, I would have said, "That's good, man. You need to lay off whatever it is you're drinking and chill out." That's the plot of a bad novel. I mean, I read 1984 long ago, right? I thought it was an interesting book. I got the point.
Yeah.
It didn't seem particularly relevant to me, like to where we were then. Now you read it, you're like, good Lord, this is exactly where we are right now.
It was an operator manual.
I have a T-shirt, and I didn't think it was appropriate to wear today. That says 1984 is not an instruction manual.
Look, state of New Jersey, within the last week, set up under the Department of Homeland Security what they call the disinformation portal. You can go online and look this up. It's operational.
This sounds safe and honest.
And it talks.
That's going to end well.
It talks about all the dangers of disinformation. Of course, the first question in everybody's mind is who gets to decide.
Right.
And they give you some examples. One of the examples of a good way disinformation was dealt with, in their view, is when Facebook shut down everybody for questioning the COVID narrative. So they lay that out not as a danger, but that's Facebook did this, and thank God, basically, because this could have been very dangerous. So they're defending Facebook, silencing people for raising questions that we now know were
true.
Yeah. Facebook hid the truth, and the state of New Jersey is saying that was a good thing. And then at the end, they have a rat line. They have an email address and a phone number, so you can call in and rat out your neighbor if they're spreading disinformation.
That is Nazi shit.
That is for real. It's online. Just go to this Department of Homeland Security or whatever they call it for the Department for New Jersey. I was on there the other day looking at it.
Everybody's that's not here, not yet.
Well, that's the problem, though. It's like, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time.
Oh, I thought it was ass first.
Sorry, but like that's the thing. It's like
we've gone from birds to elephants.
No, I see, but that's I was watching a nature documentary the other day, and I was fascinated by that's how lions do it. I was like, that. Why would they do that first?
Wow.
I don't want to know.
I didn't realize.
No, but like it's true though. Like nobody's going to notice an incremental move.
Right.
Nobody's
slow
going to
pushes.
really care about an incremental move. But all of a sudden, it's not moving quick enough. COVID happens. Now we're on the fast track, and it just feels like, man, it feels like this is how does this end? How do we get out of this?
Take back control of our democracy.
Oh, that sounds
easier said than done.
Yeah. That's guide us.
Well,
Tell us what to do.
Look,
Sam.
man, I think we were saying earlier, I always end up by telling people, get up and do whatever you can do. And then they sounds like a dodge. That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sensei. That was very deep. Do what you can do. But it's like, what I mean by that is like, stop looking for the silver bullet. Stop waiting for the guy to ride in on the white horse. Acknowledge the fact that we win the war collectively. And you don't have to go run for U.S. Senator and get elected and fix the problem tomorrow yourself. Just get up and do whatever you can do. Go run for school board. Go help your buddy run for school board. Go get in the county council. I don't know. Start by going to a school board meeting and telling the people
I've been to those.
Yeah.
Well, they're very painful. I've been to a number of them. But I mean, like somehow we got into this idea where I think basically we got fat and lazy. we won the Second World War, we won the Cold War, we put a man on the moon, yada, yada. Now it's our job to sit down on the couch and eat Cheetos and watch the game. And all the big struggles are over and somebody's taking care of this. And if I vote once a year and make a choice between two people I barely know, I have now discharged my civic duty. And the Republic was not designed like that, right? The Republic was designed to be a participatory thing. It's not just power comes from the people. The people are actually exercising the power. You're supposed to be at those school board meetings and those county council meetings and down with the state legislature. And even more than that, there should, or as equally as much, there shouldn't be a class of professional politicians down there for 20, 30 years or whatever, right? So, you get off the couch and don't just write a letter or go yell at somebody, but get off the couch and stay off the couch, stay involved. Now, how many years did it take to get in this mess? Probably quite a few. So if you're going to go back to the school board meeting one time and then tell me that they didn't fix everything the first time you went, and now you think you need to quit because it's undoable, it's like, okay, well, that's not the way this works either. I mean, you may have to wait until the next cycle where you run somebody against the school board and replace them all before you actually get the change.
I think everybody somehow forgot about stuff doesn't happen fast. It's like if you want to change things like that, it's elections. You got to pay attention to your elections.
And I tell you, I mean, look, we all grew up, or at least I don't know what they teach in schools these days. You read in history books, okay, all about the Revolution and Valley Forge and Sunshine Patriots and all this stuff. And it's kind of like, okay, it's like a parable or a fairy tale by this point. We all know what happens in the end. George wins, happy ending, all this kind of stuff, right?
Thanks for ruining it for me, Sam.
Well, just in case they didn't teach that when you went to school. But the thing is, now you're in the middle of this fight, and now all of a sudden all this stuff about what does it take to be the guy that doesn't quit and doesn't go home and doesn't hang it up starts to have some resonance. You're like, that you all of a sudden you think, now I'm beginning to get it. Because in the middle of that whole thing, how easy would it be to just say, this is too hard, man.
I think a lot of people say
I'm going home. I'm going to quit. I'm going to hang it up. Now, you realize, okay, not that easy, is it, to stick it out and recognize that this is a long slog. It'll take a long time to get the country back.
I think a lot of people think that they can't make a difference.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely not true. I mean, look, when I'm talking to people, if you've seen me speak, it is very frequent, very common for me to get at least one question from the audience, because I always do Q&As with people, where somebody says, is it time for me to pick up my AR?
Well, that's because they want to be told, because they want it over quick.
And is it time for me to start shooting people? Is it time for a civil war? To which my response, by the way, to be crystal clear, is always negatory. That is not where we are. I'm all about the Second Amendment, but no, we're not going to go start shooting people. But exactly what you said. Okay, here's the deal. What it is time for you to do is put your hands on the controls and get involved, and know it's not going to be quick, and it's not going to be simple, and it's not going to be easy, but you still have all those controls there. You're just not using them. You go to that school board and they're incredibly contemptuous of you, which I've experienced many times, been told repeatedly they would rather I not speak, and they would like to escort me from the room and so forth. But those people do in fact work for all the parents there. They can be contemptuous of them, but it doesn't change the fact that there's going to be an election. And they're all either going to get voted back in or going to be voted back out. And so if those parents actually organize and stick with it, they can throw every one of those guys and gals off of that podium and replace them with their own people. Will it happen from one meeting? It will not, obviously. It will take some time and effort. And that is true at every level of our system, right? You got folks down in Harrisburg that, by and large, as far as I can tell, pay no attention whatsoever to what most of the people in the state of Pennsylvania want. Well, they all got to get reelected too. I mean, there is nothing physically preventing you from getting organized and throwing them out.
They just did that in Pennsylvania, didn't they? Down in Westchester, they kicked 5 of the school board members. The judge did that.
The judge threw them out. Yes.
Yeah. Westchester.
Okay. Do you have a heart out? What's it? 2:45. Okay, can Micah play this game real quick? Ask a Spy.
Yes,
And then I want to talk about Unite PA.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
All right. Yes.
Do you want to do it?
Oh yeah, I want to do it. I've
I
been
thought-
writing down.
I
I've
thought
been
we-
writing down topics all
Have
for the past hour.
I thought the
Oh
list.
no, I've got so many more.
The list has somehow gotten longer as we've been sitting here.
Well, the list was 0.
The list was 0 when we sat down.
This
Yeah,
is
but I
news to
thought
all
I
of
had
us.
crossed a whole bunch of them off.
No.
All
right.
So basically,
So how do we want to do this? Yes or no? Or can't say?
I don't know.
I can ask it in a yes or no answerable format. I think.
Well, let's give that a try.
Okay, let's give
I'm
that
not
a try.
Gonna, I'm not going to agree to that because God
Okay.
knows what questions
It's
you're going to
time
ask.
for Ask a Spy.
That's very cool.
Graphic.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
Do we get background music?
Who knows?
No, we'll
We
get
can't-
copyrighted.
We
if I
can't
do
afford it. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
You got to always have good music.
Okay.
See, I told you.
Yeah.
I know.
Did Lee Harvey Oswald act alone?
Personal opinion, yes.
Really?
Really?
Yes.
I did not expect you to
I did
say
not
that.
expect you to say that at all. Did the footage that we didn't see, but people saw on TV of the live moon landing, was that real live footage?
Yes.
Man, this is not going the way I
I'm
wanted
sorry.
it
Oh,
to.
this is great. This is great.
This is
Sorry.
great.
Should
Oh.
I say
No.
no just for
No.
interest?
No, I
Sam,
want the truth.
Honesty.
Okay. Just don't ask me about the guy.
I've heard many opinions
aliens.
on conspiracy theories surrounding 9/11.
Yes.
Did a Boeing 747 hit the Pentagon?
Mm.
Or whatever plane they claimed. I don't know if it was a Boeing 747. Did a plane hit the Pentagon?
Yes.
Where are you going next?
Hit the ground first and skid it into the Pentagon.
Is that what they think?
Okay. Was UBL ever part of the CIA?
No.
Man. This is great.
It's
In
great
the
for
worst
me.
way,
It's great
in
for
the
me.
worst way possible. Okay. Let's see here.
I'm just going to have to go make up a response here to make it more interesting.
Okay.
No. This
this
is
is
great. No. I love to watch a man
the
sad.
fact that you just keep saying no to everything is just so much better.
Okay.
Okay. Afghan giants. Can I have more than a yes or no? Like he's been telling me that for a while. What do you know that I don't know?
I'm not saying that they're there. I'm saying it's possible.
You want to know what I know?
Yeah.
The very first time in my life I ever heard a reference to Afghan giants was about 45 minutes ago on this program.
Damn it!
It just gets better.
So,
it just gets so much better.
So
That just means it goes deeper than him.
Yes.
yes. So I was not cleared for that operation.
Oh,
what
that's
happened.
awesome. Let's see here. What do you think is the best source to get true, accurate news?
Obviously, ANDmagazine at Substack because that's my magazine.
Got it.
Outside of that,
I surf hundreds of sites every day, and what I try to do is I have a lot of mix of different sites, and a lot of them are foreign sites as well as U.S. And I try to go away from aggregators and more to honestly, a lot of local and smaller sites that will publish stuff that the big guys don't pick up or won't talk about.
like Loudon, like one of those was Loudon. I think locally that was published about Loudon, and nobody paid attention to it, and then it went crazy.
Yeah, so there's a whole raft of them, but I try to steer away from the big news services and the aggregators who are just pulling stuff that other people have published and go to local guys that are writing on the border, for instance, on Mexico, and are publishing stories and nobody else is bothering to pick up.
Okay.
Real quick, the best way, somebody told me once, the best way to see how your country is perceived is to watch foreign news about your country.
Yes, and also there are a lot of times, for instance, I go to a bunch of Russian sites. Okay, so there's a lot of Russian.
Shame on you, Sam.
Yeah, that's why you've probably detected the Russian accent. So that's
full disclosure, I married an actual Russian.
so because
He's been compromised.
in amidst all the propaganda and nonsense, if they detect a story that's really damaging to Joe Biden, they're going to trumpet it. Whereas half the U.S. media won't talk about it.
Yeah.
Just because the Russians published it doesn't mean I then write about it.
I think you're being kind to half the U.S. media.
I just grab a hold of that thread and then I'm like, okay, well, that could be true, actually. Let's see if we can corroborate that. But they're talking about things that a lot of our folks won't.
Okay. Donald Trump,
Yes.
last chance or biggest threat to democracy?
Are those my only two options?
What the hell's, wait, what's last chance? Like
Last
one more
chance to save this.
Oh, maybe.
Last chance to save this or biggest threat to democracy?
Yeah, neither one.
Okay.
I mean, I'm all for Donald Trump's agenda in most respects. There are certainly times when his method of communication, I wish was a little different.
It's like a drunk toddler sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Elon Musk buying into Twitter, good or bad?
So did I being jumped automatically?
I was inferring that you were talking about stay off of Twitter, Donald Trump. You think Elon Musk is a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's a great thing.
Okay.
I think he should. I think Twitter needs beat up.
Yeah.
The reason I'm hesitating on the Trump thing is because here's, in addition to the differences I may have with the president over communication, back to what we were talking about, how we're going to fix the country.
Mm-hmm.
People need to stop waiting for Donald Trump or anybody else to ride in on a white horse and save them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If I'm talking to 300 people in a room and they're asking me who's going to fix this, I say, look around.
Yeah, you take a little personal responsibility.
Stand up. Yeah. You guys go fix it. Stop waiting for somebody else to do it for you.
Okay. Let's see here. Best spy gun. James Bond had the Walther PPK.
Is he reading real things off of the list?
Oh, he's legit. Yeah, he wrote that down. Or is
he just making them up as he goes?
No, he wrote it like a psycho. Yeah.
Best spy gun.
Best spy gun.
Because I don't think the Walther PPK is that good of a gun.
Walther PPK, first of all, is too small for my hand. I don't have a PPK. I have a whatever the latest version is, and it's fine for concealment, but it doesn't fit well in my hand, and therefore it's not what I prefer to shoot with. CIA carries Glocks, and they carry, what's the mid-size?
19?
The 19
or 17.
That's your wheelhouse, man.
Yeah,
they carry Glocks.
Still.
Well, they replaced before that. They
then they have the Beretta.
They carried the Browning High Power for years and years and years, for decades, and then they replaced it with the Glock probably 20 years ago now. The real answer in any seriousness is depends on what's the purpose for which you're carrying it.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to carry it concealed, depending on how you're dressed, that's going to impact how you carry the weapon. I mean, if most guys are going to want to carry on the hip a Glock because it's a full, they can get their hand around it, and it's got a full-size magazine and that stuff. If you're wearing a T-shirt and jeans, you can't carry a gun on your hip. Now you're carrying an ankle holster. Now you're down to something smaller. Not to get all nerdy about this, when I worked
gun nerd,
when I was undercover and working and carrying concealed, and was not in a position to wear like a jacket or something that would cover a weapon on your hip, and I had to wear an ankle rig. I can tell you what I carried. I carried what they call a Chief Special 5-shot Smith & Wesson revolver with the hooded hammer. Why? Because when you're trying to get a gun off your ankle under your pants leg, whatever can snag will snag. And, and in a fraction of a second while you're screwing with getting your gun out of the holster, the gunfight is over. So, and the only time you're going to fire a gun in that situation, if that's how you're armed, is, the old expression, a belly gun, because you can stick the gun into the guy's belly.
Well, and you want a revolver for that.
You want a revolver. It's not going to fail. It's not going to snag. You're going to put hollow point rounds in it. And I've got 5 rounds and I'm 3 feet away from the guy on the other side of the table. And if I can't hit him with 5 rounds.
So are you saying the go-to is a revolver?
For that situation.
Ooh.
If I'm bopping around the mountains, in Kurdistan, the go-to is a Glock, as many mags as I can carry, and an M4, and hopefully a guy in the back seat with some
would be some
sort of automatic weapon.
A Glock is your go-to full size.
Yes.
Okay.
There's another reason why CIA does that, because 99% of your job as a case officer is to focus on other stuff.
Yeah.
So unlike a guy going out the door to conduct a part of an infantry unit where his focus is his weapon, your weapon isn't, almost like you're not thinking about. I'm focused on the asset, the meeting 50 other ways to stay alive today.
Yeah, kind of like if you get to the gun, you've royally screwed up somewhere along the way.
100%. Yeah. If I'm in a gunfight today, it's a very bad day, and I probably did about 12 things wrong to get there. But also, I need a simple, functional weapon.
Yeah.
That's why they went to the Glock. No safety, right? Yep. because that's the other thing that's going to get you killed in a gunfight if you're not.
Click.
Yes. If you ever heard that sound where.
Oh, shit.
Either the safety or being dumb enough to not have a round in the chamber. That's a bad feeling too.
So I
was that really the end of the list?
I had a few more, but
crazier shit.
All right. I didn't give him any good answers, so that was the problem.
No.
All right, wait, UFOs. Yes, no?
Oh, that's
possible?
right. UFOs. Yes, no, possible.
I don't know, man. Tucker Carlson says they're real now.
Well, so did the federal government. They're like, we don't know.
Pentagon just released some sort of thing
1,500 pages of it causes pregnancies and burns, whatever that means. So we tried to do this a couple of times, and I know that you were busy. That's what it said in the documents. I don't know what that means because I didn't read 1,500 pages. You said, how important is, and can you tell me about the Freedom Convoy? What do they stand for? Who are they? And did you go spend some time with them?
I did. You were talking about the folks that rolled down to D.C.
Just all over the country. I don't know. I don't care if they're Canadians or Australians. It's just like they all kind of have the same message.
Yeah, I did go down and hung out for a few days down there with them when they got to Hagerstown outside of D.C. I went out a little west of there and kind of set up to watch the crowds as they were rolling in, and then hung out with them down there. Look, I think it represents just sort of a grassroots feeling in the United States that people are very disillusioned with their government. And they're really fed up with, name it, a lack of accountability. The things are not working for them. We look around, name an issue. Things are not getting better for the American people. The government doesn't seem to work for them. There's scandal after scandal and lie after lie. It doesn't seem like anybody ever actually pays a price for that. And people are generally fed up. And I will tell you that, there were folks from all over the country. There were folks of all ethnicities, all persuasions. There was no right-wing, white supremacist tinge to any of this. And the outpouring just out at every place where there was an overpass on the road as they were rolling along. Folks coming out. I mean, honestly, I'm not making this up. I went to like 3 or 4 different locations. One location I went to, so it's just out in Western Maryland, and it's, there's a couple of small towns near there. And there was a guy there who was a Vietnam vet who was now in a wheelchair, who had his daughter push him out. They were on the side of a road and push him out on the grass as close as he could get to the fence that separated him from the interstate, sitting there with his flag and kids playing. And honestly, I stood there and was looking at these people and listening to them, and I actually started crying. I was like, oh, this is ridiculous. I'm standing here. But it was that emotional. It was these folks, and they were standing there it was unclear exactly when the convoy was going to come through. And so I was there at that one spot for at least an hour, and most of those folks were there when I went. And you just saw that they were just that concerned about the country, and that they were responding that viscerally to the fact that these people were going to do it. And I tell you, when the convoy rolled through, it was insane. Like, trucks started coming, and then trucks kept coming, and vehicles and RVs. And I have thousands of vehicles. And then we got down to Hagerstown, to the Speedway, where they were going to stay overnight, where they actually stayed for a few weeks after that. And then I realized that convoy was actually only one piece of the overall convoy. Yeah. They had actually been traveling on multiple roads. So I actually just drove. I ended up on a road driving past the convoy the other direction as they were coming into the Speedway. And it went on forever. I mean, I just turned on my camera at one point on my iPhone. I'm just driving at 35 miles an hour, just continuously. I have no idea how many vehicles. When I was all done, I was talking to somebody on the phone. I said, there could be 25,000 vehicles here. I have no idea how many people are here. It's crazy how many people are here. which of course the media did its best to
hide
and pretend like it didn't exist.
So for a man of your experience, right, to get emotional at a thing like that, does that give hope to the hopeless? Maybe if some people are feeling hopelessness, maybe I just don't think people have experienced it. I never went to a Trump rally ever. Hated Trump. Couldn't stand him because I was a liberal.
Right.
When I talk to people about it, they say, I don't care what he says. You have no idea the energy there. It's like everyone loves each other. Everyone seems like they're all looking out of the same telescope. And he's like, people I talk to are like, it's just so, it's what it feels. It's almost like what it feels like to be human.
Yeah,
in a situation like that.
I think that is very true. I don't think you can overstate that. And I know that sounds corny and cheesy.
It sounds
and everything
corny,
else.
yeah.
You know, when I was standing there on the side of the road, and all of a sudden I realized, hey, I'm standing here in broad daylight crying and with a bunch of thinking, wow, this is really dumb.
I bet you weren't the only one though.
No, I wasn't. And it was because there is no tinge of, you know, take any of the labels that are sort of thrown at the patriot movement, if that's the right terminology. None of those things apply. It is Americans of all shapes, sizes, descriptions. There are no signs saying anything mean or evil. Nobody's being attacked. All these people are there and they love the country and they're really worried about the country and they're looking for a way to do something and show something. You know, for this dude in his wheelchair, just being a chance to wave his American flag at these truckers, at least making him feel like he's doing something about it. And it really does give you hope. I mean, it's like, you know, so much, given the opportunity, this is so much more powerful even than these guys who think they own the world because they control Google or Twitter or all of that. I mean, I get it. They got money and tools and all this stuff, but the country united against them. That's no contest. We win, right? But
I just think everybody needs to. So, which brings us to Unite PA. Can you tell us a little bit about Unite PA?
So one of the, you know, my wife and I are involved in a whole bunch of things at a whole bunch of levels, national and state and local. And one of the things we did with some folks out of Susquehanna County back, I don't know, probably a year ago now, was stand up a local group called Unite PA. And it was just basically a bunch of concerned folks that said, we don't feel like somebody's doing much about name a whole list of issues, like most groups that are popping up all over the state. Let's get together and start doing something. And right out of the blocks, we got dragged into the whole COVID issue, masking and vaccines and all this stuff in schools. Not because that was like our only focus,
mission,
but just because it was immediate and it sucked up so much of our time. We are now expanding the group. We're going to have our next public meeting sometime in the next month or so. We haven't fixed the date, but we're looking at venues. Maybe back down to the same location where you and I first met in Clark Summit. And that focus will probably be mostly on CRT and sort of the trans movement in schools, if that's the right way to talk about it. Again, with the same goal. We're trying to educate parents what the heck's happening in your schools. What is this all about and what is really happening? So you're then armed to go do whatever you as parents choose to do on behalf of your children. And we're also going to start opening up up till now, it's just been the core group of about a dozen folks that are engineering all this, but now we're going to open it up to public membership and let people start signing up and grow the thing. In conjunction with that, we are sponsoring a meeting of Patriot Group leadership down in Allentown on the 30th of April. And in that meeting, we're pulling together leaders of as many Patriot groups, again, if that's the right term to use, in the state to hopefully sign on to a demand on the legislature that they take us back to in-person voting.
I'm for that 1,000%. No mail-ins.
We want a crisp, very clean demand. Take us back to in-person voting with hard copy ballots and voter and some form of ID, and do it right now. And stop with the excuses and stop with anything else and stop dragging your feet. That's not discriminatory to anybody. The state of Pennsylvania will issue you ID for no cost. And in any event, we can be flexible on ID, but get rid of this mail-in ballot thing. an invitation to fraud. You can never police it. You can never. It's too many holes. You just.
So I didn't plan on bringing this up. But as a CIA guy, right? Lackawanna County, the commissioner actually found video evidence of at least a dozen in one person's hand, and that's just because somebody knew about it. For the uninitiated, for the uneducated on this, tell me just quickly, why are mail-in ballots bad?
Well, mail-in ballots are bad because it opens up like points of vulnerability, I guess would be the way to describe this. Almost endless points of vulnerability. By the way, the concept of mail-in ballots has been studied for many years. In fact, there was a presidential commission, a commission back 2007, I think, which included as one of the co-chairs Jimmy Carter, who studied this whole issue and wrote a very scathing report that said, don't ever go to mail-in ballots.
Jimmy Carter wrote this report.
Yes, Jimmy Carter wrote a report saying...
The peanut farmer.
And Democratic president wrote a report...
Just making sure.
Wrote a report saying, if you ever go to mail-in ballots, the best you're ever going to be able to say is you have no idea who won the election.
Holy shit.
There's too many vulnerabilities, okay? We decided to blow all that off and we went to it anyway. Why? Because, all right, who are you mailing the ballots to? How do you determine that that person even exists, that they're still alive, that they're a resident of Pennsylvania, that they're a resident of Pennsylvania, but not also a resident of simultaneously voting in Ohio, Maryland, California, for that matter? When the ballots come back, how are you even determining that those ballots actually came from that person? What is your method of determining? A piece of paper showed up. How do you know that's the ballot you mailed out? What's your method for confirming that it's legit, that it came from that person? What if you mailed a ballot to somebody and they died, or they moved away, or they decided not to vote? To what addresses are you mailing the ballot? There's just almost endless points here at which it provides an opportunity to fraud. And so when the state of Pennsylvania moved to mail-in ballots in 2019, by the way, the Republican Party did that.
That seems real fishy.
Okay. That was horrible. Then the PA Supreme Court made it a little worse with its interpretation. Then the Secretary of State made it a little worse, but it was horrible to begin with. So they've essentially removed any meaningful check on the validity of the ballot when it shows up. If you look at the voter rolls, mail-in ballots coming from, we've got data on this that we looked at ANDmagazine, where there are like 100 ballots coming from the same P.O. box.
What?
Okay, so first of all, it's illegal to register with a P.O. box to register to vote in Pennsylvania. You have to have a physical address. So the fact that ballots are being sent to a P.O. box is already a problem. How could there possibly be 100 people coming from this same P.O. box? What P.O. box would that be that you're getting 100 ballots? When Pennsylvania was done, I
never even thought about that.
There was a committee formed after the 2020 election, Pennsylvania. They studied this, came out to a bunch of conclusions. But one of the things that is very straightforward is this. If you total up the number of votes counted in PA in 2020, and then you count the number of registered voters who voted, which obviously those numbers have to be exactly the same because one man, one vote, and every vote has to be, by law, has to be count. You have to say who voted. You can't just say a vote. It's got to be John Smith voted. The number of votes exceeds the number of voters that voted by 202,000 and change.
Where? The state of Pennsylvania?
In the state of Pennsylvania.
What?
So you got 202,000 and like 340 more.
Wait, are you saying there was over 200,000 more votes cast
than people who voted,
who are registered to vote?
Yes, that people who were voted, because they have a tabulation of exactly everybody that voted. That's X number, and the number of votes they counted is greater than that by in excess of 200,000 votes. In other words, the appearance is that 200,000 votes, more than 200,000 votes, came out of thin air. You cannot tell me who voted. By the way, that means in every county where that number exceeded the number of voters, when you certified the vote, then obviously that certification was illegal because part of the certification process is every vote has to be attributed to a person, logically.
Okay, so let me break this down like an idiot, right? So what you're saying is that I'm using this as an example. There is 50 people at the company who have a vote on whether or not they're going to do a thing.
Yep.
And when they tabulated all the ballots at the end of the company vote,
Yep.
there was like 70.
Yep. That's exactly what I'm saying. You have 200,000 more votes than voters who actually showed up at the polls and are shown
So
to
for
have
people
voted.
who say this is crazy, where could we find this?
So Dave Ball, who ran that committee and wrote the report
In the state of Pennsylvania.
wrote an article. You can go to ANDmagazine site. Another shameless plug for the magazine. But
That's what we're here for, buddy.
all we did with that article was print what he wrote, which is a perfect summation of that. And he attempted to introduce that at this point, when he finished the committee report, the legislature was having hearings to supposedly look into the election. He asked to go testify before.
I remember this is Corman, wasn't it? Or Mastriano, one of those two?
I think it was, I'm not sure who was running that committee.
Mastriano was supposed to do it, and then Corman cut him out at the knees.
It was
One of them.
Anyway, he offered there because there were hearings both in the Senate and in the House, and
Right.
both of those guys are in the Senate. It was Seth Grove in the House who was conducting the hearings. I know, Representative Seth Grove. This guy, Dave Ball, tries to introduce the report. They say that they deny him permission to introduce the report into evidence. He asks to come testify. They deny him permission to testify. So nobody ever investigated this. The report still just sits there. And as Dave Ball will say, he says, listen, all I can tell you is what the data tells me. Now, if you have an explanation like that your bookkeeping is so bad that's an explanation, I would love to hear that, because on the face of it, what it looks like is you counted 200,000 votes that no actual real person cast. And until you dispel that, that's where we are. Nobody bothered to investigate it. Nobody looked into it. It still sits there. It's never been resolved.
How do you guys feel about that? Would you ever come back and talk to us? Did you have an all right time? I mean, I know I put you on the spot and you're being recorded, but
I would, yeah. Well, I've been recorded before, but sure. I mean, I don't know. We might have to look at the spy list in advance.
Well, we can.
Yeah.
Now that we know we can play this game, we will get a better.
I don't feel like we ever finished Ask the Spy.
Uh,
I don't feel like we ever got.
Okay.
I felt like there had to be something juicier that he didn't ask me.
well,
He's asking you to do it.
Anyway, the direct answer to your question is I'll be happy to come back.
Thank you, sir.
thank you. I think you already asked the one. I was going to ask you about Klaus Schwab in the Great Reset. But
Is that real? Or in the machinations, it seems
do you
fishy.
think they're trying to? Okay, here's one. Do you think that the powers that be, the Illuminati, if you will, the lizard people, whatever you want to call them,
I can't.
Reptilian shapeshifters?
I definitely can't talk to you about the lizard people.
Reptilian shapeshifter.
the powers that be that are
The
either,
ones that are underneath the mountain at Los Alamos.
Something like that.
I'd never heard of
yeah,
them.
the Bilderberg group, yeah, the Bilderberg group or whatever it is. Do you think that part of their end goal? Okay, here we go. Is to lower human population?
I don't personally. I know that a lot of people believe that, and it's back to this thing where I start to think, okay, I don't know why you entertain that thought, and then I remember, because you've been lied to about everything on Earth, so
Question everything.
Why wouldn't you question everything at this point? I mean, I think you got a lot of folks who want to make a lot of money, have a lot of power, and unfortunately, many of them are now infused with an ideology that's really hostile to the United States. And I think they want to essentially make you into a slave and make you do what you're told. And
Happy worker.
And they don't really care if the only place you can shop is the dollar store anymore or any of that stuff. They don't care. But
All right, one last one.
it's not about the lizard people.
No, it's not about the lizard people.
Okay.
It's in the ballpark.
How about the Greys? No, I'm kidding.
Who built the pyramids? Hebrew slaves or aliens?
I'm going to go with Hebrew slaves.
I can't get a win today. I can't get. He's a pro. That's why I can't get a win.
Okay. Look, I'm sure there's 8,000 things that we could just me and myself alone. I could think of like 40 of them. I think that the world needs courageous people right now. And courage, I think, is standing up for what you believe in spite of everything that they're going to throw at you, no matter what group it is. You stick to your principles and truth, and you're able to, if new information comes along that makes you change your mind, great. That's fine. You have to be willing to do that. I think my newfound understanding of America and patriotism and love and spirituality and kindness, I think that you're, I don't know you personally, but I think you're pretty emblematic of a lot of the things that I respect and I believe. And I want to thank you, and I hope these guys agree, because they're sometimes they could be jerks, but I want to thank you so much for coming down and talking to us. And I hope you didn't think it was going to be a crazy show before you got here. We're going to be like, nobody's in clown makeup and noses and stuff, being like, "Hey, do you like pie, Sam?" But I think like you and your wife are true American heroes and patriots. I know there's a lot of people that don't agree with you, but they should at least respect that you're trying to be honest with people.
I appreciate that, and I don't think any of us are saying that everybody has to agree with everybody. That's not what the United States.
No, I don't think so. Yeah,
the United States is not about that. And I will tell you, this is going to sound very corny, but I was having this very similar conversation with somebody the other day, and I said, "Listen, man, I agree. I believe in an afterlife. Not sure that it fits into some neat theology of any particular church. Okay, one of these days I'm going to be seeing my father. Right? He was 22 years old. He was in Okinawa, earning the Silver Star. Right? And that doesn't make him a superhero, and he would be the last guy to claim that. But he's just an example of how many generations before us that literally built this place. As corny as all that sounds, as red, white, and blue, that's for real, right? That they did all that. What am I going to say to him? It was frigging too hard to preserve the republic. Like, it was okay for you guys to sweat blood and die and do all this stuff, but we just decided it was too tough for us. So we just let a bunch of clowns steal the republic from us.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, man. That's not an option, right? I mean, we would all like that we weren't in this situation, but that's where we are. So you're going to either let a bunch of chumps steal the country or stand up and do something about it.
Together. That's the one thing.
Together.
They don't want to see. They keep focusing on all the differences. They don't know what to do if we all locked arms together and said, nope.
That's why this meeting on the 30th April with Patriot Group leadership to make this demand, because right now that state house ignores all these groups, because they treat them like a bunch of tribes that'll never get their act together and start pulling in concert. So what I'm going to do is send them a signal that says, you got a problem now, because we're all working together now. You're no longer talking to this group and that group. You're talking to the whole state now.
So how do people find you? There's ANDmagazine. It's ANDmagazine.com.
ANDmagazine, ANDmagazine.substack.com.
Okay.
We moved to Substack because of
censorship.
Yes, exactly. Censorship was killing us otherwise.
Dan, put the room camera on.
I'm also
put the link here, Marky.
No, I'm not doing that.
Okay.
I'm also on Twitter and Getter and Parler and Gab and Facebook.
Did you get on Truth yet?
I have not gotten to Truth yet, and I could be thrown off of Twitter by the end of the day.
Today? Because of us?
Could be any day.
And what about Unite PA? Does Unite PA have like a website?
Unite PA has a Facebook page and a website. You can go to unitepa.com or go to Unite PA on Facebook and find all the information.
Is there anything else that we failed to mention, or you think we covered a lot of the contact bases?
No.
Oh, the email for so it's if you guys want to reach out to Sam, it's sam@samfaddis.com, SAMFADDIS.com. Man, I am so grateful that you came in today.
Had
just
fun.
At the end of your water, almost. This is great.
There you go.
Paced it perfectly.
I had fun. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
What a week.